When Elena Moretti served soup to a homeless stranger in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, she had no idea the soaked man in the corner booth controlled a financial empire worth billions. She definitely didn't expect him to collapse from poisoning 60 seconds after destroying her abusive boss's company with a single phone call. And she absolutely never imagined that armed assassins would storm through the doors, forcing her to escape into the rain-soaked streets with a widowed billionaire and his 7-year-old son, while a ruthless enemy prepared to steal everything they had. But before we get there, let me take you back to where it all started. And trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end of this one. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's dive in. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Le Ciel Doré like bullets, each drop exploding against the glass in a rhythm that made Elena's head throb. She'd been on her feet for 9 hours straight, her lower back screaming with every step as she balanced another tray of champagne flutes worth more than her monthly rent. Table 7 needs their second bottle, Marcus, the head waiter, hissed as he swept past her. And for the love of everything, smile more. You look like you're at a funeral. Elena forced her lips upward, the expression feeling more like a grimace. Maybe she did look like she was at a funeral. That's certainly how her life felt these days. One long mourning procession for dreams she'd buried under hospital bills and medical debt. The restaurant glittered around her like the inside of a jewelry box. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across tables where tech moguls sat beside oil barons, where Hollywood actresses laughed with hedge fund managers, where people discussed their third vacation homes between bites of gold-flaked desserts. Le Ciel Doré, the golden sky, catered exclusively to the kind of wealth that most people only saw in movies. Elena wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be in graduate school studying Renaissance literature. She was supposed to be teaching, writing, living the quiet intellectual life her grandfather had encouraged before he died. But then her mother got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And suddenly Elena's carefully planned future evaporated like champagne bubbles, replaced by the brutal mathematics of American healthcare and the desperate scramble for money that might buy her mother a few more months. So here she was, 29 years old, serving overpriced wine to people who wouldn't notice if she dropped dead at their feet. Elena! Roberto, the restaurant manager, appeared beside her like a shark scenting blood. He was a thin man with slicked-back hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. What did I tell you about your posture? Stand up straight. These guests are paying for an experience, and you look like a beaten dog. Sorry, Roberto. The words came automatically, empty of meaning. And fix your hair. You're representing Le Ciel Doré, not some diner in Queens. He said Queens like it was a disease. Elena tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear, her fingers trembling slightly. Not from fear, she'd stopped being afraid of Roberto months ago. The trembling came from exhaustion and the particular kind of rage that had nowhere to go, that just built up inside your chest until you thought your ribs might crack from the pressure. Through the window, lightning split the sky over Manhattan. The storm was getting worse. Elena counted the seconds until thunder rolled across the city. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the deep boom that rattled the champagne flutes on her tray. Did you hear me? Roberto's voice cut through her thoughts. Yes. Sorry. I'll fix it. He studied her with cold disapproval, then moved on to terrorize one of the busboys. Elena delivered the champagne to table 7, where a group of investment bankers were loudly debating cryptocurrency while their dates looked bored. One of them, a man in his 40s with 2 white teeth, grabbed her wrist as she set down his glass. Hey, sweetheart, what time do you get off work? Elena gently extracted her wrist. I'm afraid I'm not available, sir. Everybody's available for the right price. He grinned at his friends, who laughed on cue. She walked away without responding, her face burning. This was the part they didn't tell you about in the job interview, how being poor meant swallowing your dignity multiple times a night, how desperation tasted like champagne and bile. The kitchen doors swung open and Marcus appeared again, his face flushed. Elena, I need you on table 12. Dimitri just called in sick. I'm already covering tables 1 through 11. Did I ask for excuses? Table 12, now. Elena glanced at the seating chart. Table 12 was in the northeast corner, partially hidden by a decorative column, the table they used for guests who wanted privacy or who weren't quite prestigious enough for the main dining room, currently empty. It's not occupied, she pointed out. It will be. We have a walk-in. Walk-ins didn't happen at Le Ciel Doré. You needed a reservation made weeks in advance, plus the kind of bank account that required 8 figures just to get your foot in the door. But Elena didn't argue. She just nodded and headed toward table 12, her feet aching inside shoes that were starting to fall apart. That's when the front door opened. The man who stumbled inside looked like he'd been pulled from the East River. His trench coat was soaked through, water streaming from its hem to puddle on the marble floor, dark hair plastered against his forehead, a small backpack slung over one shoulder, the kind you'd see on college students or backpackers, completely out of place in a restaurant where most guests arrived with Louis Vuitton luggage or nothing at all. The room went quiet. Not all at once. It was more subtle than that, like a wave of silence rolling from table to table as people stopped mid-conversation to stare. "Oh my God," someone whispered loudly. "Is that a homeless person?" The man stood in the entrance, rain dripping from his clothes, his chest rising and falling like he'd been running. His eyes, even from across the room, Elena could see they were an unusual shade of gray, scanned the dining room with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not embarrassment, not shame, something else. Something that looked almost like calculation. Roberto appeared instantly, his face transforming from professional courtesy to undisguised disgust in half a second. "Sir!" The word came out sharp as a slap. "I'm afraid we don't allow... I'd like a table." The man's voice was quiet, almost hoarse, but it carried across the dining room with unexpected authority. "This is a private establishment, members only. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I can pay." The man reached into his coat. Roberto held up a hand, his lip curling. "I don't care if you have a handful of nickels, friend. You need to leave. Now, before I call security." Near the window, a young man in an expensive suit leaned back in his chair, grinning. Elena recognized him. Ryan Keller, one of those tech startup founders who'd made millions before turning 30 and couldn't stop talking about it. He came in twice a week with different women, never tipping more than 5%. "Hey, buddy," Ryan called out. "I think you're looking for the soup kitchen. That's about 6 blocks south." His companions laughed. The sound spread through the restaurant like a disease. The man in the wet coat didn't respond. He just stood there, water pooling around his boots, his expression unreadable. Elena felt something twist in her chest. She recognized that look. She'd seen it in the mirror often enough, that particular exhaustion that came from being treated like you didn't exist, like you were something to be scraped off the bottom of someone's shoe. "I'm not asking again." Roberto's hand moved toward his phone. "Leave, or I'll have you removed." The man's jaw tightened. For a moment, Elena thought he might argue. Then his shoulders sagged slightly, and he turned toward the door. And Elena, who'd spent months learning to keep her head down and her mouth shut, who'd perfected the art of being invisible, found herself moving before she could think better of it. "Wait." Her voice cut through the room. Roberto spun toward her, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Every survival instinct screamed at her to back down, to apologize, to return to her invisible safe space. But she looked at the man in the doorway, really looked at him, and saw something that made her throat tighten. He was shivering. "Table 12 is open," she heard herself say. "I can seat him." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush her. Roberto's face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. "Elena, kitchen, now." "Roberto, he's just... kitchen, now." But before she could move, the man spoke again. "Vos esset amabilis, domina." The words hit Elena like cold water. Latin, not textbook Latin, but the strange, corrupted variant her grandfather used to speak. The dialect from a tiny alpine valley where he'd grown up. A linguistic fossil that had survived in isolation for centuries. She'd spent her childhood learning it from him, had written her undergraduate thesis on its grammatical structures. Nobody spoke it anymore. Nobody even knew it existed outside of academic papers. She stared at the man, her breath catching. He was looking directly at her now, and she saw that his gray eyes weren't cold at all. They were sharp, intelligent, and completely focused on her face. "Quid dices?" she whispered. "What did you say?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "I said you are kind, miss." "How do you—" "Elena!" Roberto grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You're fired. Get your things and get out." "Roberto, please, I need this job." Abrusum agents. Should have thought of that before you embarrassed me in front of our guests. You have 5 seconds to get to the kitchen before I call the police and have you both arrested for trespassing. The room watched like spectators at a gladiator match. Elena felt her face burning, felt the familiar sting of tears she absolutely would not let fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. The man in the wet coat stepped forward. This is unnecessary. I'll leave. There's no need to,
Oh, I think there's plenty of need. Ryan Keller stood up from his table, his phone already out and recording. This is gold. Homeless guy trying to crash Le Ciel Doré. My followers are going to love this. He walked over, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble, and studied the man like he was examining an insect. What's your story, bro? Trying to score some free food? Or just wanted to see how the other half lives? I'd appreciate it if you'd stop recording, the man said quietly.
Public space, public property. First Amendment, my friend. Ryan circled him, keeping the camera rolling. You know what your problem is? You think the world owes you something. You think you can just walk in anywhere and... The man moved suddenly, his hand shooting out to grab Ryan's wrist. For someone who looked exhausted and beaten down, he moved with startling speed and precision. I asked you to stop recording. His voice hadn't gotten louder, but something in it made Ryan's smirk falter. Get your hands off me, you... The man released him and stepped back, but the damage was done. Ryan's face flushed with humiliation and rage. You know what? Ryan grabbed his water glass. I think you need to cool off. He threw the water directly in the man's face. The dining room gasped. Even Roberto looked shocked. The man stood there, water dripping from his hair and face, his chest rising and falling slowly. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet Elena had to strain to hear it. That was a mistake. Ryan laughed. What are you going to do about it? Sue me with your cardboard box? The man reached into his coat. Roberto tensed, probably thinking about weapons. But what the man pulled out was a phone. An expensive one, Elena noticed, completely at odds with his appearance. He dialed a single number and pressed the phone to his ear. James? Yes, it's me. Pause. I need you to pull the files on Ryan Keller. Tech startup? Yes, that one. Another pause, longer this time. The man's eyes never left Ryan's face. I want his company audited by morning, every penny accounted for, and contact our friends at the SEC. I think they'll be very interested in his fund allocations from last quarter. Ryan's smile was starting to look forced. Dude, what are you... Also call our contacts at his primary investors. I believe we hold significant shares in most of them. Explain that we're concerned about their judgment in backing Mr. Keller's venture. The man tilted his head slightly. How long will that take? No, that's fine. I'll wait. The color was draining from Ryan's face. Who the hell are you? He demanded, but his voice had lost its swagger. The man lowered the phone. My name is Adrian Thorne. The room erupted. Elena had heard that name before. Everyone who read the financial news had heard that name. Adrian Thorne, the ghost of Wall Street, the billionaire who'd vanished from public life years ago after his wife died, who supposedly controlled a financial empire so vast and so secretive that even other billionaires spoke about him in whispers. And he'd been standing in the rain looking like a vagrant while they mocked him. Ryan Keller looked like he might vomit. Mr. Thorne, I had no idea. Please, I was just... Quiet. Adrian raised the phone again. James? Yes, proceed with everything we discussed. Mr. Keller will be receiving calls shortly. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his coat. Ryan was sweating now, his hands shaking. You can't do this. I'll fight it. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then showed it to Ryan. Elena couldn't see what it said, but she saw Ryan's face go white as paper. 60 seconds, Adrian said softly. That's how long it took to dismantle everything you built. I'd suggest you spend the next few hours calling your lawyers. You're going to need them. Ryan stumbled backward, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then he turned and ran for the door, his footsteps echoing across the marble. The dining room had gone completely silent. Adrian turned to Roberto, who looked like he'd just witnessed a natural disaster. I believe I requested a table. Mr. Thorne, Of course, sir. Absolutely. We'd be honored. Roberto was practically bowing. Please allow me to seat you personally at our finest. No. Adrian's eyes found Elena across the room. I'd like that table in the corner, and I'd like this young woman to be my server. Every eye in the restaurant turned to Elena. Roberto's smile looked painful. Absolutely, Mr. Thorne. Elena, please escort Mr. Thorne to table 12. Elena's legs felt numb as she walked across the dining room. The other guests watched her like she was a creature from another planet. She reached Adrian, and he gave her a small nod. Shall we? She led him to table 12, her mind spinning. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. Adrian Thorne was supposed to be in Zurich, or Tokyo, or wherever billionaires like him spent their time. He wasn't supposed to be walking through rainstorms in Manhattan wearing a coat that looked like it came from a thrift store. She pulled out his chair. He sat down, water still dripping from his coat onto the floor. Can I get you something to drink? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Just water, please. And perhaps some soup if you have it. We have a lobster bisque. Anything warm is fine. Elena nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Thank you. She looked back. He was watching her with those strange gray eyes, and the expression on his face was hard to read. Exhaustion, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like pain. For what? She asked. For treating me like a person. Before she could respond, the front doors exploded inward. The sound was deafening. Wood splintering, glass shattering, screams erupting from every corner of the dining room. Elena spun around to see 3 men in black tactical gear storming inside, automatic weapons raised. Everyone on the ground! Chaos erupted. Guests dove under tables, screaming. Roberto bolted for the kitchen. One of the investment bankers from table 7 actually pulled his date in front of him like a human shield. Elena stood frozen, her brain refusing to process what was happening. Then Adrian was beside her, his hand gripping her arm with surprising strength. Come with me, right now. What? Move. He yanked her toward the kitchen doors as gunfire erupted behind them. The sound was impossibly loud, nothing like the movies. Elena felt the concussive force of each shot in her chest, saw champagne glasses exploding on tables as bullets tore through the dining room. They crashed through the kitchen doors into a world of stainless steel and shouting cooks. Adrian didn't slow down. He pulled Elena past the dishwashing station, past the walk-in freezer, toward the back exit that the staff used for smoke breaks. Wait, I don't understand. Those men are here for me, Adrian said, his voice tight. And anyone near me is in danger. I'm sorry, I'm so goddamn sorry. I shouldn't have come here. He kicked open the back door and they stumbled into the alley. Rain hammered down, instantly soaking through Elena's thin uniform. The alley was dark except for a single flickering streetlight and the glow from a black SUV idling at the far end. Adrian pulled her toward the SUV. The back door opened and a man emerged, broad-shouldered, military haircut, moving with the kind of precision that screamed special forces. Sir, we need to go. Now. Get her in the car, James. Sir, she's a civilian. I said get her in the car. James grabbed Elena's arm and practically lifted her into the SUV. Adrian dove in after her, and James slammed the door shut before sprinting to the driver's seat. The SUV peeled out of the alley just as 2 men in tactical gear appeared in the doorway behind them, their weapons raised. Elena heard gunfire, felt the impact of bullets hitting the rear of the vehicle, solid thuds that should have shattered the windows but didn't. Bulletproof, Adrian said, reading her expression. He was pressed against the window, looking back at the restaurant. They won't be able to follow us. James knows what he's doing. Elena's ears were ringing. Her hands were shaking so hard she had to clench them into fists. What the hell is happening? Who were those people? Why? I'll explain everything, I promise. But first we need to get somewhere safe. The SUV whipped around a corner, the tires hydroplaning slightly on the wet asphalt. James was driving like a man being chased by the devil himself, which, Elena supposed, might not be far from the truth. She looked at Adrian, really looked at him for the first time. Up close, she could see that beneath the wet hair and exhausted expression, he was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 32, 33. His face was lean, almost gaunt, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone. There were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept properly in days, maybe weeks.
You're really him, she said. Adrian Thorne. The Adrian Thorne. Yes. Why were you dressed like that? Why did you walk into the restaurant looking like someone who wouldn't be recognized? He managed a bitter smile. Because I needed to see something. I needed to understand who I could trust. I don't understand. You will. He pulled off his wet coat, revealing an expensive shirt underneath, Tom Ford or Brioni, probably worth more than Elena made in a month. James, how far out are we? 15 minutes to the safe house, sir. I've got 3 teams converging on the restaurant to handle the cleanup. Casualties? Unknown at this time. Adrian's jaw tightened. He looked at Elena. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. Caught up in what? Who were those men? What did they want? They wanted me dead. He said it simply, like he was discussing the weather. They've wanted me dead for quite some time now. Tonight they finally made their move. Elena felt like she was in a car accident, that same sense of unreality, of time moving too slowly and too quickly all at once. Why? She whispered. Adrian leaned back against the seat, his eyes closing briefly. When he opened them again, they looked older somehow, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Because I control things that powerful people want to take from me. Because my wife died and left me weak. Because they think I'm vulnerable. He turned to look at her. They might be right. The SUV turned onto a highway, the city lights blurring past in the rain. Elena tried to organize her thoughts, tried to make sense of any of this, but everything felt fractured and strange. How did you know that dialect? She asked suddenly. The one you spoke at the restaurant. My grandfather's dialect. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Your grandfather was from the Valmalenco? How did you know that? Because my mother was from there too. A tiny village called Torre di Santa Maria. Maybe 100 people lived there when she was growing up. Elena stared at him. My grandfather was from Torre di Santa Maria. Then we probably knew the same families. My mother married an American businessman and left when she was 19. She died when I was 10, but before that, she made sure I learned the language. She used to say it was important to remember where you came from, even if you could never go back. There was grief in his voice when he spoke about his mother. Elena recognized it because she carried the same grief about her own father, who died when she was 12. What was her name? Elena asked. Your mother. Julia. Julia Benedetti, before she married. I think... Elena's voice caught. I think my grandfather mentioned that name once. He said there was a girl who left the village to marry an American. He said she was smart, brave. Adrian smiled, and for the first time the expression reached his eyes. She was both those things. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain hammer against the bulletproof windows. Why did you come to the restaurant? Elena asked. If you knew it was dangerous, why put yourself in that situation? Because I needed to test something. Adrian's smile faded. I've been away from the world for a long time. Since my wife died, I've isolated myself, conducted all my business remotely, trusted almost no one. But my enemies have grown bold in my absence. They think I'm weak now, broken. So I needed to see who would show their hand if I made myself vulnerable. You used yourself as bait. Yes. That's insane. Probably. He rubbed his face with both hands. But I got what I needed. I know who my enemies are now. I know who's working with them. And I know... He trailed off, but Elena finished the thought for him. You know who showed you kindness when they thought you had nothing. Adrian looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Why did you help me? He asked. You knew Roberto would punish you. You knew the other guests would judge you, but you did it anyway. Elena thought about her mother lying in a hospital bed, tubes and machines keeping her alive while the bills piled up like snow. Thought about her grandfather teaching her that language, telling her stories about the mountains, about how people in the valley looked after each other because nobody else would. Because you looked cold, she said simply. And nobody deserves to be treated like that. The SUV pulled off the highway onto a side road that led into what looked like an industrial area. Warehouses and loading docks, all dark and shuttered for the night. We're here, James announced, pulling up to a nondescript building that looked abandoned. A garage door opened automatically as they approached, revealing a pristine underground parking structure. The SUV descended into the garage, and the door sealed shut behind them with a heavy clang.
Adrian opened his door. Come on. We'll be safe here while I figure out what to do next. Elena didn't move. I need to call my mother. She'll be worried. And I have bills to pay. I can't just disappear. Elena. Adrian's voice was gentle. Those men who attacked the restaurant? They saw you with me. They saw me protect you, which means they now consider you a target. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? I'm sorry. I truly am. But until I neutralize the threat, you're not safe. Neither is anyone close to you. He paused. Where's your mother right now? St. Vincent's Hospital. She's in the oncology ward. Adrian pulled out his phone and dialed. James Huang, authorization code Delta 779. I need a full security detail deployed to St. Vincent's Hospital immediately. Oncology ward. Patient name. He looked at Elena. Sophia Moretti, Elena whispered. Sophia Moretti. I want 4 men on rotating shifts, and I want the hospital security briefed on potential threats. This is not a drill. Move now. He ended the call. She'll be protected. I promise you that. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. This was too much. All of it was too much. Why are you doing this? Adrian climbed out of the SUV, then turned back to offer her his hand. Because you're in danger because of me, he said, and because... He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. Because I haven't met anyone like you in a very long time. Someone who does the right thing even when it costs them everything. Elena looked at his outstretched hand. She thought about the restaurant, about Roberto's cruelty, about Ryan Keller's smirk. She thought about serving people who looked through her like she was invisible, about the grinding exhaustion of trying to save her mother while the world slowly crushed her under its heel. And she thought about this man. This strange, damaged billionaire who spoke her grandfather's language and who'd destroyed someone's company in 60 seconds for throwing water in his face. She took his hand. They walked through a series of security doors into what looked like a high-tech command center. Monitors covered one wall, showing various security camera feeds. A small apartment had been built into the space, minimal furniture, but everything looked expensive and functional. James was already at one of the computer stations, typing rapidly. Sir, I'm getting reports from the restaurant. 4 injured, none critical. The attackers fled before police arrived. I've got our cleanup crew handling witness statements. Good. What about Sterling? No direct connection yet, but the tactical gear matches equipment we've seen his people use before. Elena felt like she'd walked into the middle of a spy movie. Who's Sterling? Adrian poured himself a glass of water from a dispenser. His movements slow and careful, like every muscle in his body hurt. Sterling Graves, another billionaire. We used to be, not friends exactly, but cordial competitors. Then my wife died, and I withdrew from public life. Sterling saw an opportunity. He's been systematically trying to take control of my assets for the past 3 years. Can't you just sue him or something? If I had proof, yes, but Sterling's smart. He hides behind shell companies, proxies, cutouts. Everything he does is just barely legal, impossible to trace directly back to him. Adrian set down the glass. Until tonight. Tonight he made a mistake. He went after me publicly with witnesses, which means he's desperate. And desperate people make more mistakes. James looked up from his monitor. Sir, we've got a problem. What kind of problem? Sterling just called an emergency board meeting. He's claiming you've become mentally unstable, that your appearance at the restaurant tonight proves you're unfit to run your companies. He's got 3 board members ready to vote for your removal. Adrian's face went very still. When? The meeting's scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow, Zurich time. That's... Adrian checked his watch. 15 hours from now. He's moving fast, James said. Faster than we anticipated. Adrian stood there for a moment, his jaw working. Elena could practically see him thinking, calculating, planning several moves ahead. Get me a secure line to Marcus Chen in Hong Kong, he said finally. And wake up Natasha in London. I need her legal team ready to file injunctions within the hour. Yes, sir. Adrian turned to Elena. I need to make some calls. There's a bedroom through that door if you want to rest. This is going to be a long night. Elena should have been exhausted, should have been terrified, should have been demanding to go home, to return to her normal life, however miserable it was. But instead she heard herself say, "Let me help." Adrian blinked. What?
You said Sterling made a mistake by going public. That means you need people who saw what happened tonight, people who can testify. I was there. I saw everything. Elena, this is dangerous? I know. You already told me I'm a target either way. She crossed her arms. So either I sit in that bedroom feeling useless and scared, or I help you fight back. Those are my options, right? Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. James, get Elena a secure phone. She's going to need to make a statement. He looked at her. You're right. We can use tonight's witnesses. But are you sure about this? Once you're involved, there's no going back. Elena thought about her mother in the hospital, about the medical bills she could never pay, about Roberto's cruelty and Ryan Keller's smirk and every wealthy bastard who'd ever treated her like she was nothing. I'm sure, she said. And somewhere in Zurich, Sterling Graves was about to learn that the homeless man he'd tried to kill in a Manhattan restaurant had just recruited an unlikely ally, a waitress with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, legal documents, and increasingly complicated financial maneuvers that made Elena's head spin. She sat at one of the workstations while James showed her how to file a formal witness statement through the encrypted system Adrian's lawyers used. Around them, Adrian paced back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid-fire German to someone in Zurich. No, I don't care what time it is there. Wake him up, Adrian said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Tell him if he votes with Sterling tomorrow, I'll personally ensure every regulatory agency in Switzerland takes an interest in his last 5 years of tax returns. He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. That's not a threat, Marcus. That's a promise. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Elena finished typing her statement and sat back, her shoulders aching from tension. Through the windows of the command center, she could see the rain still hammering down outside. Her phone, her regular phone, not the encrypted one James had given her, sat on the desk beside her, buzzing periodically with messages. Probably from her roommate wondering where the hell she was. Possibly from the hospital. You should call your mother, Adrian said, appearing beside her so quietly she jumped. He'd shed the wet shirt and changed into dark jeans and a black sweater that probably cost more than her car. Let her know you're safe. I don't know what to tell her. The truth is usually simplest. You witnessed a crime. You're helping the police with their investigation. You'll be staying somewhere safe for a few days. He paused. I know lying to family is difficult, but the less she knows right now, the safer she is. Elena picked up her phone, then set it back down. She'll hear it in my voice. She always does. Then don't call. Send a text. Tell her you'll visit tomorrow. Will I? Be able to visit tomorrow, I mean. Adrian's expression was hard to read. I'll make sure you can. James will arrange a security detail to take you to the hospital whenever you want. A security detail. Elena laughed, the sound coming out slightly hysterical. 12 hours ago I was serving soup. Now I need armed guards to visit my mother. This is insane. Yes, Adrian agreed. It is. He sat down in the chair beside her, moving like every joint hurt. Up close, she could see the exhaustion written in every line of his face. When was the last time he'd actually slept? Why were you really at the restaurant tonight? She asked. And don't give me that line about testing people. There are safer ways to do that. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd heard it all night. Because I'm tired, he said simply. Tired of hiding. Tired of managing everything through intermediaries and encrypted calls. Tired of being a ghost. He looked at her. My wife died 4 years ago. Cancer, ovarian. By the time they caught it, there was nothing they could do. She lasted 6 months. Elena felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry. Everyone says that. Like it helps. He rubbed his eyes. After she died, I couldn't be around people anymore, especially wealthy people. All they wanted to talk about was money, opportunities, investments. Meanwhile, my wife was gone and I had a 3-year-old son who kept asking when mommy was coming home. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. How did you... Elena didn't know how to finish the question. How did I keep going? I didn't really. I put Lucas in the care of nannies and tutors and threw myself into work. Built walls, cut people off, turned my company into a fortress and myself into a prisoner inside it. He laughed bitterly. Sterling saw his opportunity, started picking off my allies one by one. By the time I noticed what was happening, he'd already turned half my board against me. So, tonight I needed to remind myself why I'm fighting. Needed to see if there were still people in the world who'd choose kindness over self-interest. He met her eyes. And then you seated me at that table and paid for my soup with your own money, even though I could see you couldn't afford it. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. How did you know I paid for it? Because Roberto was screaming about it in the kitchen. I could hear him through the door. Adrian smiled slightly. You're a terrible liar, by the way. When you told him you'd already processed the payment, your left eye twitched. I don't have a tell. Everyone has a tell. James appeared behind them, holding a tablet. Sir, we've got a problem. Sterling's not just calling a board meeting. He's leaked a story to the Financial Times claiming you've had a mental breakdown and were found wandering the streets of Manhattan in a delusional state. Let me see. James handed him the tablet. Elena leaned over to read the screen. The headline made her stomach drop. Reclusive billionaire Adrian Thorne spotted in apparent mental crisis. The article featured a grainy photo, clearly taken by someone at the restaurant, showing Adrian in his wet coat, looking disheveled and exhausted. The text below it painted a damning picture of a man who'd lost touch with reality after his wife's death, who'd become paranoid and unstable, whose grip on his business empire was slipping. They're destroying you, Elena whispered. They're trying to. Adrian set the tablet down, his expression calm. It won't work. How can you be so sure? Because Sterling made two mistakes tonight. First, he assumed I'd be alone. He didn't account for you. Adrian stood up. And second, he forgot that I didn't build my empire by playing fair. He walked over to one of the monitors where James was pulling up files. Show me everything we have on Sterling's movements over the past 6 months. Every meeting, every phone call, every goddamn coffee he bought. If he's moving this fast, he's desperate. And desperate people leave trails. While James worked, Adrian turned back to Elena. You should rest. There's a bedroom through that door. And James stalked the bathroom with, I'm not tired. It was a lie. Elena was exhausted, but the idea of lying down while all this was happening felt impossible. Besides, you said I could help. I said you could give a statement. I didn't say you should stay up all night but you're about to dig through months of financial records looking for something that proves Sterling's behind the attack, right? Something that connects him to those men with guns? Adrian nodded slowly. Then you need another set of eyes. I might not know much about high finance, but I know how to read, and I'm good at finding patterns. It wasn't a complete lie. Elena had spent years analyzing Renaissance texts, tracking down obscure references and hidden meanings. How different could financial documents be? Very different, as it turned out. For the next 2 hours, Elena stared at screens full of numbers that might as well have been written in ancient Sumerian. Shell companies and offshore accounts, and something called derivative positions that James tried to explain 3 times before giving up. But gradually, through the chaos of numbers, she started to see shapes, connections. Wait, she said suddenly, pointing at a transaction on her screen. This company here, Meridian Holdings, it shows up in like 6 different places. They bought shares in one of Adrian's suppliers, they invested in a tech startup that Adrian was negotiating with, and they made a donation to some charity foundation that... Hold on. She clicked through several more screens. That foundation is run by one of the board members who's voting against you tomorrow. Adrian came over to look at her screen, James right behind him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. How did you find this? Adrian asked quietly. I noticed the name kept appearing. Is it important? James, pull everything you can find on Meridian Holdings. Registration, ownership structure, fund movements, everything. James's fingers flew across his keyboard. Lines of code scrolled past faster than Elena could read them. Then he stopped, his face going still. Boss, you need to see this. The 3 of them crowded around James's monitor. He'd pulled up a corporate registration document that showed Meridian Holdings was ultimately owned by a trust based in the Cayman Islands. And the trustee was Sterling's sister, Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. He's been using his sister's companies to infiltrate my network. It gets better, James said grimly. He pulled up another document.
Meridian also made payments to a security company called Blackridge Solutions 3 months ago. Blackridge is the company that provides tactical training to private military contractors, Adrian finished. The same kind of training those men at the restaurant would have had. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. So Sterling hired them. We can't prove that yet. The payment could have been for legitimate security services. But it's a connection. And if we can trace the money from Meridian to Blackridge to those specific operatives, Adrian's jaw tightened. James, I need you to contact our friends at the FBI. Tell them we have information about a coordinated attack on a civilian target, and we're willing to cooperate fully with their investigation. On it, Adrian turned to Elena, and something in his expression had shifted. He was looking at her differently now, like she was a person instead of a problem to be managed. Thank you, he said. I just noticed a name that kept repeating. You found a thread we'd missed in 3 years of investigating Sterling's network. That's not nothing. He paused. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks again. She wasn't used to compliments that sounded genuine. Wasn't used to being seen at all, really. I had a good teacher, she said. My grandfather used to give me these puzzles when I was a kid. He'd take a page from a book and black out random words, then make me figure out what the missing words were based on context. He said it taught you to see patterns instead of just reading. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was. He also drank too much grappa and once got into a fistfight with a priest over a card game, but yeah, he had his moments. Adrian laughed. Actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected that Elena found herself smiling despite everything. The moment broke when James's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then his face went pale. Boss, we've got a situation. Hospital security just reported suspicious activity near the oncology ward. 2 men were asking questions about Sophia Moretti at the nurses' station. Our team intercepted them, but Elena was on her feet before he could finish. I need to get to the hospital, now. Elena, wait, Adrian started. That's my mother. If something happens to her because of me, nothing's going to happen to her. Our team is there. They know what they're doing. You don't understand. She's already dying. She doesn't need this stress. She doesn't need... Elena's voice cracked. She pressed her hands against her face, trying to hold back tears that suddenly felt inevitable. Adrian's hand settled gently on her shoulder. James, get the car ready. We're going to St. Vincent's. Sir, that's not secure. If Sterling's people are watching the hospital, then they'll see me visiting a friend's mother. Elena's right. Her mother doesn't deserve to be terrorized because I dragged her daughter into my war. He looked at Elena. 5 minutes. Get whatever you need. The drive to St. Vincent's took 20 minutes through rain-slicked streets that were mostly empty at 4 a.m. Elena sat in the back of the bulletproof SUV, her knee bouncing nervously, while Adrian made calls to coordinate with the security team at the hospital. James drove with one hand on the wheel and the other on a pistol that sat in the cup holder between the seats. The casual presence of the weapon should have terrified Elena, but instead it just felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. They pulled up to a side entrance of the hospital, where 2 men in suits were waiting. Former military, Elena guessed from the way they stood. One of them opened the SUV door. Mr. Thorne, the situation's contained. The 2 individuals in question claimed to be insurance investigators, but their credentials didn't check out. Hospital security has their information and photos. Where's Mrs. Moretti? Still in her room. She's stable. One of our people has been stationed outside her door since we arrived. Elena pushed past them without waiting for permission. She knew this hospital too well, had spent too many nights here over the past year. She navigated the corridors on autopilot, barely registering the flickering fluorescent lights or the antiseptic smell that always made her stomach turn. Her mother's room was at the end of the oncology ward. A man in a dark suit stood outside the door, and he nodded to Elena as she approached. Inside, her mother was asleep, her face gaunt in the dim light from the monitors beside the bed. She looked smaller than Elena remembered, frailer, like she was slowly disappearing into the white hospital sheets. Elena sank into the chair beside the bed and took her mother's hand. The skin felt paper thin, the bones too prominent. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Behind her, she heard Adrian enter quietly. He stood near the door, giving her space.
For a long moment, the only sound was the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft hiss of the oxygen machine. "How long has she been sick?" Adrian asked quietly. 14 months. They said she had maybe 6 months left when they diagnosed her. That was a year ago. Elena's voice was steady, clinical. She'd learned to talk about it this way, like it was happening to someone else. "She's tougher than they thought." "She must be if she raised someone like you." Elena looked back at him. "You don't know anything about me. I know you paid for a stranger's soup with money you probably needed for something else. I know you found a connection in my files that my investigators missed. I know you demanded to come here even though you knew it might be dangerous." He moved closer, his footsteps quiet on the linoleum floor. "That tells me plenty." "Those are just things I did. They don't tell you who I am." "Don't they?" Before Elena could respond, her mother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening when she saw Elena. "Tesoro," she murmured, her voice raspy from sleep and medication. "What are you doing here? It's the middle of the night." "I wanted to check on you." "Liar. You're a terrible liar. Always have been." Her mother's eyes shifted to Adrian. "And who's this? Please tell me you finally brought home a boy who isn't another struggling artist." "Mom." "What? I'm dying. I'm allowed to be nosy." She studied Adrian with the kind of frank assessment that only sick people and very old people can get away with. "You're too skinny. Elena, make him a sandwich." Despite everything, Elena found herself laughing. "He doesn't need a sandwich, Mom. Everyone needs a sandwich, especially rich boys. They never eat properly." She shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. "What's your name?" "Adrian Thorne, ma'am." "Italian?" "My mother was." "Then you definitely need to eat more. Italian boys should have some meat on their bones." She reached for the water cup on her bedside table, and Elena helped her take a sip. "So what brings you to my daughter's life at 4 a.m? And don't lie to me. I can smell a lie from 3 rooms away." Adrian glanced at Elena, who nodded slightly. If her mother was going to be under security protection, she deserved to know why. "I'm in some trouble," Adrian said carefully. "Elena helped me tonight, and now some people who don't like me very much might try to use her to get to me. I've arranged for security to keep you safe until the situation is resolved." Sophia Moretti absorbed this information with the calm of someone who'd already faced down the worst thing that could happen to her. "This trouble," she said. "It's the kind that involves police?" "Among others, yes." "Elena, did you do anything illegal?" "No, Mom. I gave a witness statement about something I saw." "And this witness statement put you in danger?" "Maybe. We're not sure yet." Sophia looked between them, her eyes sharp despite the morphine drip. "You know what I think?" "What, Mom?" "I think you should have brought the sandwich." Adrian actually smiled. "I'll remember that for next time." "Good boy." Sophia settled back against her pillows. "Elena, come here." Elena leaned closer. Her mother reached up to touch her face, her fingers cool against Elena's skin. "You have that look," Sophia said softly. "The same look you had when you told me you were dropping out of graduate school to take care of me. Like you're about to do something brave and stupid." "Mom, shit." "Listen to me. I don't have much time left. We both know it, so don't pretend otherwise. And I've made my peace with that. But I haven't made my peace with you throwing your life away because you feel guilty. I'm not... You are. You've been doing it for over a year, working yourself to death at that horrible restaurant, giving up everything you wanted, all because you think you owe me something." Sophia's grip tightened on Elena's hand. "You don't owe me anything, Tesoro. You hear me? Nothing." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. "You're my mother, and you're my daughter, which means your job is to live, not to be my nursemaid, not to sacrifice yourself on the altar of my cancer." She looked at Adrian. "You seem like a smart man. Tell her I'm right." Adrian moved to stand beside Elena. "Your mother's right." "See? Smart man." Sophia closed her eyes, her breathing evening out. The conversation had exhausted her. "Go do your brave, stupid thing, Elena. Just try not to get shot." "I'll do my best." They stayed for another 20 minutes while Sophia drifted back to sleep. The security guard remained outside, and James checked in twice to confirm the perimeter was secure. When they finally left,
Elena felt like something had shifted inside her chest, like a weight she'd been carrying had gotten slightly lighter. In the elevator on the way down, Adrian spoke quietly. She's remarkable. She's dying. Both things can be true. Elena leaned against the elevator wall, exhaustion finally catching up with her. I keep thinking if I just work hard enough, if I just earn enough money, I can fix it. I can pay for better treatments, experimental drugs, something. But it doesn't work that way, does it? No, it doesn't. The elevator doors opened onto the parking garage. James was waiting with the SUV, along with both security guards. All clear, sir. No further incidents. They climbed into the vehicle. As they pulled out of the garage, Elena saw the first hints of dawn lightening the eastern sky. In a few hours, Adrian's board meeting would begin in Zurich. Sterling would make his move, and Elena's life, whatever was left of her old life, would be completely gone. What happens now? She asked. Adrian checked his watch. Now we go back to the safe house and prepare. The board meeting starts in 11 hours. I need to be on video conference for it, which means Sterling can't know where I am. If he thinks I'm too unstable or scared to appear in person, it strengthens his position. So you have to seem calm and in control. Exactly. Even though you're being hunted by people with guns. Especially because I'm being hunted by people with guns. The moment I show weakness, Sterling wins. He rubbed his eyes. I should warn you, the next few days are going to be complicated. Sterling won't give up just because we found one connection. He'll fight harder, get dirtier, and anyone near me will be in danger. You're trying to give me an out. I'm trying to give you a choice. You've already helped more than I had any right to ask. If you want to step away now, I'll arrange protection for you and your mother until this is over. No questions asked. Elena thought about the restaurant, about Roberto's sneer and the investment banker grabbing her wrist and Ryan Keller's phone camera in her face. She thought about her mother's words, "Go do your brave, stupid thing." "I'm staying," she said. Elena, I found that connection in your files, didn't I? Which means maybe I can find others. Maybe I can help you win this. She met his eyes. Plus, you still owe me for the soup. Adrian's smile was tired but genuine. How much was it? $18. I'll write you a check. You're a billionaire. Make it 20. They made it back to the safe house just as full dawn broke over Manhattan. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming. James disappeared to catch a few hours of sleep while Adrian prepared for the board meeting. Elena found herself standing in front of the windows, watching the sun rise over buildings that looked like they were made of gold in the early morning light. Beautiful, isn't it? Adrian said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. I've lived in this city for 6 years and I don't think I've ever actually watched the sunrise. Too busy working? Too busy surviving. She took the coffee gratefully. You know what's weird? I should be terrified right now. Men with guns tried to kill you. Sterling's people are stalking my mother. My entire life has been turned upside down. But instead, I just feel awake, like I've been sleepwalking for years and I'm finally conscious again. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. It's not just adrenaline. She turned to face him. When was the last time you felt alive? Actually alive, not just going through the motions? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. The day before my wife got her diagnosis. We took Lucas to Central Park. There was a jazz band playing near Bethesda Fountain. Sarah, that was her name, Sarah, she grabbed my hand and made me dance with her right there in front of everyone. Lucas was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is what life is supposed to feel like. And then 3 days later, we found out she was dying, and I never felt that way again. He stared into his coffee cup. Until tonight, maybe. For just a moment, when you found that connection in the files and looked so proud of yourself, I felt something other than anger or grief or exhaustion. What did you feel? Hope, I think. The possibility that maybe things could be different. He set down his coffee. I have a son, Elena. Lucas. He's 7 years old. He lives with me in Zurich, but I barely see him. I'm always working, always managing crises, always building walls to keep people out. And he's growing up with a father who's physically present but emotionally absent. Just like I grew up after my mother died. So change it. It's not that simple, isn't it? Elena set down her own coffee and turned to face him fully. You're one of the richest men in the world. You can do literally anything you want. If you wanted to spend more time with your son, you could. And let Sterling take everything I've built, everything Sarah and I worked for together? What's the point of keeping the empire if you lose yourself in the process? If you lose your son? Adrian's jaw tightened. You don't understand the stakes here. Then explain them to me. If Sterling takes control of my companies, thousands of people lose their jobs, pension funds collapse, investments disappear. The ripple effects could destabilize markets across 3 continents. His voice rose slightly. This isn't just about me and my personal grudge. People depend on me. And your son depends on you too, just in a different way. They stood there at the growing light, the silence between them heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Adrian exhaled slowly. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. And I hate that you're right. Story of my life. Despite everything, he smiled. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. It's starting. Sterling just released another statement claiming I've disappeared completely. He's painting himself as the responsible party trying to save my company from my own incompetence. Can he actually win at the board meeting? If he has enough votes, yes. He needs a simple majority to declare me unfit and assume temporary control. Adrian pulled up a document on his phone. I've got 4 votes I can count on. Sterling has 3. There are 5 board members who could go either way. So you need to flip at least 2 of them, or discredit Sterling badly enough that the swing votes won't risk backing him. Adrian's fingers moved across his phone screen. James found something interesting about that charity foundation you discovered, the one Meridian donated to. Turns out it's been funneling money to offshore accounts in Sterling's name. If we can prove that during the meeting, he goes down for fraud. And I keep my company. Elena looked at the man beside her, this strange, damaged billionaire who spoke her grandfather's language and who'd destroyed someone's career for being cruel. Who was fighting to save an empire he barely seemed to want, for reasons that maybe even he didn't fully understand. What do you need me to do? She asked. Adrian met her eyes and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. I need you to help me fight, he said. I need you to be the person who looks for connections and patterns and truth in all the noise. Can you do that? Elena thought about her mother in the hospital bed, about her grandfather teaching her to see what was hidden, about all the years she'd spent invisible and powerless and angry. Yes, she said, I can do that. Outside, the city was fully awake now. Somewhere in Zurich, Sterling Graves was preparing for war. And somewhere in this safe house, a waitress and a billionaire were preparing to fight back with weapons Sterling would never see coming. Truth, evidence, and the kind of desperate courage that only came from having absolutely nothing left to lose. The board meeting started at 3 p.m. Zurich time, which meant 9 in the morning in New York. By then, Elena had consumed enough coffee to fuel a small vehicle and had read through so many financial documents that numbers were starting to blur together in her vision. James had returned from his brief sleep looking almost as exhausted as when he'd left, and Adrian hadn't slept at all. He sat at the main workstation wearing a crisp white shirt and navy suit jacket that made him look nothing like the soaked stranger from the restaurant. Below the camera frame, he still wore the sweatpants he'd changed into hours ago. Elena had laughed when she noticed, and Adrian had shrugged. They can see my face and my credibility, he'd said. They don't need to see my comfort. Now the large monitor flickered to life, showing a sleek conference room in Zurich. 12 faces appeared in individual video boxes arranged around the screen. Elena recognized Sterling Graves immediately, silver-haired, tanned, with the kind of teeth that came from expensive cosmetic work. He was smiling. Adrian, Sterling said, his voice warm and concerned in a way that made Elena's skin crawl. I'm so glad you could join us. We've all been very worried about you. I'm sure you have been, Sterling. Adrian's voice was perfectly level, betraying nothing. Shall we begin? The chairman of the board, an elderly Swiss banker named Klaus Hoffmann, cleared his throat. Yes. Well, this is obviously a difficult meeting. Adrian, Sterling has raised some concerns about your fitness to continue leading Thorne Industries. In light of recent events, you mean the coordinated attack on a public restaurant where I was having dinner? Adrian interrupted smoothly. Or do you mean Sterling's leak to the Financial Times claiming I'm mentally unstable?
Sterling's smile didn't falter. Adrian, no one is attacking you. We're simply concerned about your well-being. When a man of your stature is found wandering the streets of Manhattan, dressed like a vagrant. I was dressed like a private citizen having a meal. Last I checked, that wasn't a crime. But your behavior has been erratic. You've been isolated for years. You refuse to attend meetings in person. You've made increasingly paranoid accusations about business competitors.
Accusations I can prove. Adrian nodded to James, who began uploading files to the shared screen. These documents show a pattern of corporate espionage targeting Thorne Industries over the past 3 years. Shell companies buying up our suppliers. Coordinated media campaigns against our reputation. And most interesting, payments from a company called Meridian Holdings to a private military contractor called Blackridge Solutions. Meridian is owned by your sister, Sterling. Would you like to explain that? The temperature in the digital room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sterling's smile finally cracked. That's a ridiculous connection. My sister's business dealings are completely separate from... Are they? Elena had been watching the other board members' faces, and she saw several of them leaning forward, interested. Because Meridian also made donations to the Hoffman Foundation. That's your charity, Klaus, the one that's supposed to fund cancer research, but has been moving money to offshore accounts instead. Klaus Hoffman's face went white. How dare you? I dare because it's true. Adrian pulled up another document. Here's the money trail. Meridian donates to the foundation. The foundation transfers funds to a consulting company in the Bahamas. The consulting company makes payments to accounts controlled by Sterling Graves. It's money laundering dressed up as philanthropy. The screen erupted in voices, board members talking over each other, demanding explanations, throwing accusations. Sterling was shouting something about privacy violations and illegal surveillance. Klaus looked like he might have a stroke. Elena watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. This was power, real power, not the petty cruelty of restaurant managers or the casual dismissal of rich customers. This was the kind of power that could destroy lives with a few well-placed documents and the right words at the right moment. This is absurd. Sterling finally managed to make himself heard. You're so desperate to maintain control that you're fabricating evidence. The FBI doesn't think it's fabricated. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. I've already shared these documents with federal investigators. They're very interested in your relationship with Blackridge Solutions, especially given that 3 of their contractors were arrested last night after attacking a civilian restaurant in Manhattan. Those men are talking, Sterling, and what they're saying connects directly back to you. That was a bluff. Elena knew it was a bluff because she'd been sitting next to Adrian all morning and nobody had called with that information. But Sterling didn't know it was a bluff, and his face betrayed him for just a second, pure panic flickering across his features before he could slam his professional mask back into place. Too late. The other board members had seen it. I think, said a woman named Catherine Walsh, who controlled a massive pension fund, that we need to table this vote until a full investigation has been completed. If there's even a possibility that Sterling has engaged in illegal activity, there's no possibility, Sterling snapped. This is a witch hunt. Adrian is paranoid and unstable, and I'm trying to protect my company from a hostile takeover orchestrated by a man who tried to have me killed. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes intense. And I have the evidence to prove it. So here's what's going to happen. This board is going to vote against Sterling's motion. Then you're all going to go home and wait while the authorities sort through the mess he's created. And if any of you have been accepting money from Meridian or any of Sterling's other shell companies, I'd suggest you contact your lawyers now, because when this all comes out, and it will come out, you don't want to be on the wrong side of it. The silence that followed was absolute. Klaus Hoffman looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. I move to table the vote pending investigation. Seconded, Catherine Walsh said immediately. All in favor? 9 hands went up. Only Sterling and 2 others abstained. Motion passes. Klaus's voice was hollow. This meeting is adjourned. The screen went black. For a moment, nobody in the safe house moved. Then James let out a long breath. Holy hell, boss, you actually pulled it off. Adrian slumped back in his chair and Elena saw his hands were shaking. The calm, controlled businessman from the video call was gone, replaced by someone who looked like they'd just run a marathon. "We didn't pull anything off," he said quietly. "We bought time. That's all." "That's more than we had yesterday," Elena pointed out. "Maybe. But Sterling knows I bluffed about the FBI. He knows those contractors haven't actually given him up yet, which means he's going to move faster now, get more desperate. And desperate men do desperate things." As if on cue, Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went still. "It's my house in Zurich, the security system," he answered. "Yes?" Elena couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she could see Adrian's expression changing. Shock, then fury, then something that looked almost like fear. "When? How many?" A pause. "And Lucas?" Elena's stomach dropped. Lucas. His son. "No, don't engage them. Get Lucas to the safe room and lock it down. I don't care about the property damage. Just keep my son safe." Another pause. "I'm on my way. Have the plane ready in 20 minutes. He ended the call and stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "Sterling sent people to my house. They're trying to break through the security perimeter." "Your son," Elena started, "is in the safe room with his nanny and 3 security guards. He should be fine. The room is designed to withstand a siege, but I need to get there, now." James was already moving, gathering equipment, making calls. "I'll have the jet fueled and ready. We can be wheels up in 30 minutes if we push it." Adrian turned to Elena. "I need you to stay here. You'll be safe, and James will leave 2 men. "No. Elena, this isn't up for, You said I could help you fight. You said you needed someone to look for patterns and truth. Well, I'm not going to do that from a bunker in Manhattan while you fly into danger." She stood up, meeting his eyes. "Besides, you're going to need someone watching your back. Sterling proved tonight that he doesn't care about rules or consequences. If he's willing to attack your home, he's willing to do worse. Which is exactly why you should stay here where it's safe." "I haven't been safe since you walked into that restaurant. None of us have been. At least in Zurich I can be useful." Adrian looked at James, who shrugged. "She's got a point, boss. And we could use another set of eyes, especially someone Sterling doesn't know is involved." "This is insane." "Everything about the last 12 hours has been insane," Elena said. "What's a little international travel on top of that?" Adrian studied her face for a long moment. Then he shook his head, something that might have been a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. My mother says both, usually in the same sentence. Fine. But you do exactly what James tells you, when he tells you. No arguments. This isn't a financial meeting where the worst thing that happens is someone loses money. Sterling has already sent armed men after me twice. I can't guarantee your safety." "I'm not asking you to." 25 minutes later, Elena found herself in the back of the SUV racing toward a private airfield in New Jersey. She'd called her mother from the safe house, keeping her voice light and casual while explaining she'd be out of town for a few days. Her mother had seen through it immediately. Of course she had. But she'd also understood somehow that Elena needed to do this. "Just come back alive, Tesoro," she'd said. "Everything else we can figure out later." Now Elena sat across from Adrian in the leather interior of the vehicle, watching him type furiously on his phone. His jaw was tight, his movements sharp and controlled. She'd seen him calm under pressure before, but this was different. This was personal. "Tell me about Lucas," she said quietly. Adrian's fingers stilled on the keyboard. "What?" "Your son. Tell me about him. What's he like?" "Why does that matter right now?" "Because you're spiraling. I can see it. And when people spiral, they make mistakes." Elena leaned forward. "So tell me about Lucas. Give your brain something else to focus on for 60 seconds. Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his phone. "He's 7, almost 8. He has his mother's eyes. Dark brown, not gray like mine. He's obsessed with dinosaurs, has been for 2 years now. His favorite is the Ankylosaurus because it has armor and a club tail." A ghost of a smile crossed Adrian's face. "He says it's the best dinosaur for defending your castle." "Smart kid. Too smart, maybe. He asks questions I don't know how to answer, like why his mother had to die, why I'm always working, why we can't just be normal like other families." Adrian's voice roughened. Last month he asked me if I even liked being his father, or if I was just doing it because I had to. What did you tell him? I told him I love him more than anything in the world, which is true, but I don't think he believed me. Elena felt something twist in her chest. Kids are perceptive like that. They know when you're telling them what they want to hear versus what you actually feel. And what do you think I actually feel? I think you're terrified of losing him the way you lost his mother, of failing him, of turning into the kind of father who's so afraid of grief that he can't let himself feel anything at all. She paused. I think you love him so much it scares you, so you keep him at a distance because distance feels safer than vulnerability. Adrian stared at her. You got all that from one conversation? I got it from watching you talk about him. The way your voice changes, the way you won't quite meet my eyes when you say his name. Elena shrugged. Also, my dad did the same thing to me after my grandmother died. He was so afraid of losing anyone else that he built walls around himself. By the time the cancer took him, I barely knew him anymore. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just don't make the same mistake. Lucas needs his father, not the billionaire, not the empire builder, just his dad. The SUV pulled onto the tarmac where a sleek white jet was waiting, engines already running. They boarded quickly, Adrian's security team checking every entrance and exit before allowing them inside. The interior was exactly what Elena expected. Leather seats, polished wood, the kind of quiet luxury that whispered money instead of shouting it. As soon as they were airborne, Adrian disappeared into a small office at the rear of the plane, video calling his security team in Zurich to get updates on the situation. James sat across from Elena, cleaning and checking a pistol with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. You ever fire one of these? He asked, not looking up from his work. A gun? No. Might want to learn. Things get messy sometimes. I'm hoping things don't get that messy. James smiled, but there was no humor in it. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's the job. Is this what you always do? Protect billionaires from other billionaires? This is what I do for Adrian. Before this, I was military. Special operations. Did 3 tours in places I can't talk about, saw things I'm trying to forget. He reassembled the pistol with smooth, practiced movements. Adrian pulled me out of a dark place after I got discharged. Gave me purpose again. So yeah, this is what I do, and I do it because he's one of the few people in this world worth protecting. You really believe that? I've seen him give away millions to strangers. I've watched him destroy his own profit margins to save workers' jobs. Last year, a factory in Bangladesh collapsed. One of his suppliers. He could have walked away, claimed no responsibility. Instead, he paid for funerals, medical care, rebuilt the whole facility with better safety standards. Didn't even tell anyone. I only know because I handle his financial security. James met her eyes. Most billionaires I've met are parasites. Adrian's different. He actually gives a damn. Before Elena could respond, Adrian emerged from the office looking grim. Status update. Sterling's people breached the outer perimeter but couldn't get through the reinforced doors. Lucas is still secure in the safe room. Local police are en route, but Sterling's lawyers are already claiming it was a misunderstanding, that they were private security conducting a routine check. A routine check with automatic weapons? Elena said. Apparently they claim the weapons were never actually drawn, that my security team is exaggerating the threat to make Sterling look bad. Adrian's jaw tightened. It's going to be his word against mine, and half the board still thinks I'm paranoid. What about security footage? Being reviewed now, but even with footage, Sterling can claim his contractors went rogue, that he never authorized an actual attack. He's covered his tracks well. The flight to Zurich took 8 hours. Elena tried to sleep but couldn't. She kept thinking about the men with guns at the restaurant, about her mother in the hospital, about a 7-year-old boy hiding in a safe room wondering why people wanted to hurt his father. Somewhere over the Atlantic, she found Adrian standing at the window, staring out at the darkness. Can't sleep either? She asked. Sleep feels like a luxury I can't afford. He didn't turn around. Every time I close my eyes, I see Sarah. The last days. The way the cancer hollowed her out until she was barely there anymore. And then I see Lucas, and I wonder how long before I lose him too. Not to cancer, but to my own failure as a father. You're not failing him, aren't I? I'm dragging him through this war with Sterling, putting him in danger because I refuse to give up my empire. Maybe he'd be better off if I just walked away. Let Sterling have it all. Take Lucas somewhere quiet and actually be his father for once. Elena moved to stand beside him. You really believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. Then let me tell you what I see. I see a man who's fighting to protect what his wife helped him build. I see someone who cares enough about his employees that he won't let a parasite like Sterling destroy their livelihoods. And I see a father who's terrified of failing his son, which means he still cares deeply about being a good father. She paused. Bad fathers don't worry about being bad fathers. They just are. Adrian finally turned to look at her. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just good at pattern recognition, remember? And the pattern I see with you is someone who's been running from grief for so long that he's forgotten how to stand still and feel things. Feeling things hurts. Yeah, it does. But it also means you're alive. They stood there in the darkened cabin, the only sound the steady hum of the engines. After a moment, Adrian spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. The night Sarah died, I was holding her hand. Lucas was asleep in the chair beside the bed. And right at the end, she looked at me and said, "Don't let this break you." She made me promise. And then she was gone. His breath hitched. I've been trying to keep that promise, trying to stay functional, to keep the company running, to raise Lucas. But I think I've been keeping the promise wrong. I've stayed unbroken by not letting myself feel anything at all. And that's not living. That's just existing. Elena didn't know what to say. So she did the only thing she could think of. She took his hand, just held it, the same way she'd held her mother's hand in the hospital, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. They stood like that for a long time, watching darkness give way to dawn somewhere over the Atlantic. They landed in Zurich at 2 in the afternoon local time, the city spread out below them, all pristine streets and mountain views and the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. A convoy of SUVs was waiting on the tarmac, along with a severe-looking woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Margit, head of Adrian's household security. Mr. Thorne, the situation is contained, she said in crisp, accented English. Lucas is asking for you. He's frightened, but unhurt. Take me to him. They drove through streets that looked like something from a postcard, clean, efficient, beautiful in a way that felt almost sterile. Adrian's estate was in the hills overlooking Lake Zurich, behind gates that looked decorative but which Elena suspected could withstand a tank. The house itself was modern, all glass and steel and minimalist lines. Beautiful, but cold, like a museum instead of a home. Inside, Adrian went immediately to the safe room, a reinforced panic room built into the basement. When the heavy door swung open, a small boy launched himself at Adrian with enough force to nearly knock him over. Papa! Adrian caught him, lifting him up despite the boy's size. Hey, buddy, I'm here. You're safe. Lucas buried his face in Adrian's shoulder. He was small for 7, with dark curly hair and wide brown eyes that were currently filled with tears. There were bad men. Margit said they wanted to hurt you. Margit was being careful. They're gone now. And I'm fine, see? Adrian pulled back enough to meet his son's eyes. I'm right here. You were in America. You're always somewhere else. The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. Elena could see it in the way his face crumpled for just a second before he pulled himself together. I know, Lucas. I know. And I'm sorry. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight. Lucas studied his father's face with the kind of serious intensity that only children can manage. Promise? Promise. The boy seemed to accept this. He turned in Adrian's arms and noticed Elena for the first time. Who's that? This is my friend Elena. She helped me in New York. Like a superhero? Elena smiled. More like a waitress who got lucky. What's a waitress? Someone who brings people food at restaurants. Lucas considered this. That sounds nice. Papa never takes me to restaurants. He says it's not safe. There was accusation in those words, and pain. Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Margit appeared. Mr. Thorne, the police are here. They want your statement about the incident. Of course they do. Adrian set Lucas down gently. Buddy, can you show Elena your dinosaur collection while I talk to the police? I promise I'll be right back. Lucas looked uncertain, but he nodded. He reached out and took Elena's hand with the unconscious trust that children sometimes show strangers. Come on, I have an ankylosaurus. It's the best one because it has armor. Elena let herself be led upstairs to a bedroom that was tastefully decorated but felt oddly impersonal, like someone had hired a designer to create the perfect child's room without actually consulting the child. The dinosaurs, though, those were clearly Lucas's own choice. Dozens of them lined shelves organized by species and size with the kind of careful precision that reminded Elena painfully of Adrian. This one's my favorite, Lucas said, holding up the ankylosaurus. Papa got it for me when Mama died. He said it would protect me. That's a good choice. Very protective dinosaur. Do you have a favorite dinosaur? I think probably the Stegosaurus. I like the plates on its back. Lucas nodded seriously, as if this revealed something important about her character. That's a good one, too. Do you want to play dinosaurs with me? Elena glanced toward the door, wondering how long Adrian would be with the police. Sure. How do we play? For the next 20 minutes, Elena found herself in an elaborate game that involved dinosaurs defending a castle made of blocks against invading forces. Lucas narrated the entire thing with complete seriousness, his earlier fear apparently forgotten in the joy of play. And somewhere in the middle of it, Elena realized she was actually having fun. When Adrian finally returned, he found them in the middle of an epic battle between the Ankylosaurus and a T-Rex that Lucas insisted was the bad guy because he eats everyone. Who's winning? Adrian asked. The Ankylosaurus, Lucas said proudly. He always wins because he's the best at defending. Of course he is. Adrian crouched down beside them. Hey, Lucas, can I borrow Elena for a minute? We need to talk about some grown-up stuff. Lucas's face fell. Are you leaving again? No, I'm staying right here, in this house, tonight and tomorrow and the day after that. I promise. He reached out to ruffle his son's hair. But I need to work out some things with Elena first. Why don't you have Margit bring you a snack? I'll come find you in half an hour and we can have dinner together. Just you and me. Really? Really? Lucas seemed to weigh this, then nodded. He carefully set down his dinosaurs and went to find Margit, leaving Adrian and Elena alone in the bedroom. Adrian sank onto the floor beside the block castle, suddenly looking exhausted. The police are useless. Sterling's lawyers already have them convinced this was a misunderstanding. Without proof that he ordered the attack, they can't do anything. What about the security footage? It shows armed men approaching the house. It doesn't show who sent them or why. Sterling's claiming it was a private security firm he hired to assess vulnerabilities in my system as a favor, helping me improve my defenses. That's insane. That's also impossible to disprove unless one of those men testifies against him. And they won't. Sterling pays too well. Elena picked up the ankylosaurus Lucas had been playing with, turning it over in her hands. So what now? Now we dig deeper, find something else. There has to be a connection we're missing, something that proves Sterling's orchestrating all of this. Adrian rubbed his face. But I also need to keep Lucas safe, which means maybe you were right earlier. Maybe I should just walk away, take my son and disappear. Let Sterling have the empire. You don't mean that, don't I? Look at what this is doing to Lucas. He's 7 years old and he's hiding in safe rooms while armed men try to break into his house. What kind of life is that? It's a life where his father is fighting for something important, fighting against someone who wants to destroy everything you've built. Elena set down the dinosaur. Lucas is scared right now, yes, but he's also watching you refuse to give up, refuse to let the bad guys win. That matters. Or he's watching me put my pride ahead of his safety. Is it pride, or is it principle? Elena met his eyes. You told me thousands of people depend on your company, that if Sterling takes over, pension funds collapse and jobs disappear. That's not pride, Adrian. That's responsibility. And teaching Lucas that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's dangerous. That's not a bad lesson. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head, almost smiling. How do you do that? Do what? See things so clearly. Make complicated decisions seem simple. Nothing about this is simple, but sometimes you have to choose between bad options and slightly less bad options, and running away feels like the worst choice. Even if it means Lucas stays in danger, Lucas is already in danger. The question is whether you're going to teach him to hide from it or face it. Elena stood up, offering Adrian her hand. Besides, you're not alone in this anymore. You've got James, you've got me. We'll figure something out. Adrian took her hand and pulled himself to his feet. For a moment they stood very close, and Elena was suddenly aware of how different he looked from the man at the restaurant, cleaned up, rested, but still carrying that same bone-deep exhaustion in his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for coming here, for helping with Lucas, for all of it. You're welcome. Now go have dinner with your son. I'll work with James on finding that missing connection." But before Adrian could respond, an alarm started blaring through the house. Loud, insistent, impossible to ignore. Adrian's phone buzzed simultaneously, and when he looked at the screen, his face went white. "That's the security system for my office downtown. Someone's trying to break into the servers." He was already moving toward the door. "If they access those files, they'll have everything," Elena finished. "Every document we found on Sterling, every piece of evidence." "James!" Adrian was running now, Elena right behind him. They found James in the security center, already pulling up camera feeds from Adrian's downtown headquarters. The screen showed a team of 6 people in business suits entering the building through the front door. They had key cards, security badges. They looked like they belonged there. "Inside job," James said tersely. "They've got access credentials. Building security is letting them right through. How long until they reach the server room?" 4 minutes. Maybe 5 if they hit traffic in the elevators. Adrian swore viciously. "Can we lock them out remotely?" "Not without shutting down the entire network. And if we do that, it triggers the automatic data purge. We'd lose everything. Including our evidence against Sterling. Including everything." Elena stared at the screens, her mind racing. 6 people. 4 minutes. And if they reached that server room, Sterling won. He'd destroy the evidence, and there would be nothing left to stop him from taking over Adrian's company, from getting away with everything he'd done. "Then we don't let them reach it," she said. Both men turned to look at her. "How?" Adrian demanded. "We're 20 minutes away. Even if we left right now, you have employees in that building, right? People who work late?" "Yes, but then call them. Tell them there's an emergency, a fire drill, a gas leak, whatever. Get everyone out of the building and trigger the evacuation protocol. That'll lock down the elevators and seal the server room automatically." James and Adrian exchanged a look. Then Adrian grabbed his phone. "Margaret, I need you to call building security at the downtown office. Tell them to initiate an immediate evacuation. Full protocol. Emergency lockdown." He listened for a second. "I don't care what reason you give them. Say there's a bomb threat if you have to. Just get it done now." On the screens, the 6 people in suits were at the elevators, waiting, looking calm and professional and utterly convinced they were about to get away with corporate espionage. Then alarms started blaring in the building, the elevator lights flashed red, and the 6 people suddenly looked a lot less calm. "Lockdown initiated," James reported. "Elevators frozen, server rooms sealed. They're not getting in." Adrian let out a breath he'd apparently been holding for the past 30 seconds. Then he pulled up another screen, the building's security system. "I'm flagging their credentials as compromised. Building security will detain them for questioning." "Will they, though?" Elena asked. "If Sterling's got people inside your companies, then we make sure the right people are asking the questions." Adrian was already dialing another number. "Catherine?" "Yes, it's Adrian Thorne. I need a favor. Your husband still works for the Swiss Federal Police?" A pause. "Good. I have 6 people attempting corporate espionage at my downtown office. They're being detained now. I need officers I can trust to take custody before Sterling's lawyers make them disappear." Elena watched him work, coordinating responses, calling in favors, building a case piece by piece. This was what he did. This was why Sterling couldn't beat him through normal means, because Adrian was better at this game, smarter, more connected, more ruthless when he needed to be. But Sterling knew that too, which is why he kept escalating, kept pushing harder, which meant this wasn't over, not even close. 20 minutes later, Adrian's phone rang again. He put it on speaker so Elena and James could hear. "Mr. Thorne, this is Inspector Mueller with the Federal Police. We've taken custody of the 6 individuals from your office building. They're claiming they had legitimate access to conduct a scheduled security audit. An audit I never authorized, Adrian said flatly. Check their credentials against our official vendor list. You'll find they don't match any approved contractors. We're doing that now. However, their lawyer has already arrived and is threatening legal action for false imprisonment. Let me guess. The lawyer works for Sterling Graves. There was a pause. How did you know that? Because this is the third attack on my assets in 24 hours, Inspector, and they all connect back to the same source. I've already sent you the documentation showing financial links between Graves and the contractors who attacked a restaurant in Manhattan last night. Now you have 6 more people connected to him attempting to access my secure servers. At some point, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Mr. Thorne, I understand your frustration, but without direct evidence that Mr. Graves ordered these actions, then get me that evidence, question those 6 people, trace their payments, find out who hired them, and follow the money. That's your job, isn't it? The inspector's voice hardened slightly. I'm aware of my job, Mr. Thorne. I'm also aware that accusations against men like Sterling Graves require more than circumstantial connections. They require proof that would stand up in court. Then I'll get you that proof. Adrian ended the call before the inspector could respond. He stood there for a moment, his jaw working, hands clenched into fists at his sides. Boss, James said carefully, maybe we should... I know what you're going to say. Slow down. Be careful. Don't do anything rash. Adrian turned to face them. But Sterling's not slowing down. He's escalating. And every hour we spend trying to build a perfect legal case is another hour he uses to destroy what's left of my credibility and gut my company from the inside. So what do you want to do? Elena asked. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, staring at the screen showing his downtown office building. Then his expression changed, hardened. I want to stop playing defense. I want to hit him where it hurts. He pulled up a file on one of the monitors. James, remember that property deal Sterling's been working on? The development project in Singapore? The luxury resort? Yeah, what about it? It's his flagship project. He's been telling investors it's going to revolutionize high-end tourism in Southeast Asia. He's sunk almost $2 billion into it, most of it borrowed against his other holdings. Adrian's fingers moved across the keyboard. What if someone were to discover that the environmental impact studies were falsified, that the land rights are contested, that the whole project is built on fraud? James's eyes widened. Boss, are you saying... I'm saying we dig into that project until we find something. And we will find something, because men like Sterling don't spend $2 billion without cutting corners somewhere. Adrian looked at Elena. You found Meridian in my files. Can you do it again? Can you find the weakness in Sterling's Singapore deal? Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was different from before. Before, they'd been defending. Now Adrian was talking about going on the offensive, about weaponizing information the same way Sterling had been doing to him. I can try, she said, but I'll need access to Sterling's files, his contracts, his investor documents, everything. James can get you in. He's good at that sort of thing. James didn't look entirely comfortable with this plan. Sir, hacking into a competitor's private files is illegal. If we get caught, we won't get caught. And even if we do, I'll take full responsibility. This is my decision. Adrian's voice was ice. Sterling tried to kill me. Twice. He attacked my home while my son was inside. He's trying to destroy my company and ruin everyone who depends on it. I'm done being the bigger person. I'm done following rules he's been breaking from the start. Elena understood the anger driving this decision. She felt it herself, the fury of being pushed and pushed until you had no choice but to push back. But she also heard something else in Adrian's voice, something that worried her. Adrian, she said quietly, if you do this, you become just like him. He turned to look at her, his gray eyes cold. Maybe that's what it takes to win. Or maybe it's what it takes to lose yourself. They stared at each other across the security center. James looked between them, clearly uncertain whose side he should be on. You told me you built your empire differently than people like Sterling, Elena continued. You said you gave a damn. You helped workers, funded hospitals, protected people. If you cross this line, what makes you different from him? The difference is, I'm doing it to protect people, not exploit them. That's what every powerful person tells themselves, that the rules don't apply to them because their intentions are good. Elena moved closer to him. My grandfather used to say that the road to hell is paved with justified exceptions. Once you start telling yourself the ends justify the means, you can justify anything. Adrian's jaw tightened. So what would you have me do? Just let Sterling destroy everything? No. I'd have you find another way, a legal way, one that doesn't require you to become the kind of person you hate. There might not be another way. Then we make one. The silence that followed was broken by a small voice from the doorway. Papa? They all turned to see Lucas standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his ankylosaurus. His eyes were wide and uncertain. Are you fighting with Elena's? Adrian's expression immediately softened. He crossed the room and knelt down in front of his son. Nobody. We're just disagreeing about something. That's different from fighting. It sounded like fighting. You were using your angry voice. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Adrian reached out to smooth Lucas's hair. What are you doing up? It's past your bedtime. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the bad men. What if they come back? They won't, I promise. You promised you'd have dinner with me too, but then the alarms went off and you ran away. The words landed like a physical blow. Elena could see it in Adrian's face, the guilt, the shame, the realization that he'd broken his promise to his son less than an hour after making it. You're right, Adrian said quietly. I did promise that, and I broke my promise. I'm sorry, Lucas. That wasn't fair to you. Lucas looked down at his dinosaur. Mama never broke promises. I know she didn't. Your mother was better at this than I am, better at a lot of things. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. But I'm trying, buddy. I'm really trying. Are you going to leave again to go fight the bad men? Adrian glanced back at Elena, then at James, then at the screen showing various security feeds from around the city. She could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to figure out how to be both the father Lucas needed and the businessman fighting for his empire. No, he said finally. I'm not going to leave. The bad men can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I'm staying here with you. Really? Really? In fact, why don't we make that dinner I promised you? I think Margaret has ingredients for pasta. Lucas's face lit up. Can Elena come too? Adrian looked at Elena, and something in his expression had shifted. The cold fury from before was gone, replaced by exhaustion and something that looked almost like surrender. If she wants to, he said. Elena smiled. I'd like that. They left James in the security center to monitor the situation and made their way to the kitchen. It was enormous and modern, all stainless steel and marble countertops, with a view of the lake that was probably stunning in daylight. Now it just reflected their faces back at them in the darkened windows. Adrian moved around the kitchen with surprising competence, pulling out pasta and vegetables and fresh herbs from the refrigerator. Lucas sat at the counter watching him, swinging his legs and chattering about dinosaurs and school and a friend who'd promised to show him a fossil next week. Can I help? Elena asked. You can chop the tomatoes if you want. There's a cutting board in that drawer. Elena found the board and a knife that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She started dicing tomatoes while Adrian put water on to boil, and Lucas narrated an elaborate story about how Ankylosaurus would defend a castle against invading T-Rexes. It was so bizarrely normal that Elena almost forgot about armed attackers and corporate espionage and billion-dollar battles. Almost forgot that 24 hours ago she'd been serving soup to strangers and worrying about medical bills. Now she was in a billionaire's kitchen in Switzerland, making dinner with a man who controlled a financial empire and his son who just wanted his father to keep a promise. You're good with him, Adrian said quietly, nodding toward Lucas. He's easy to be good with. He's a sweet kid. He is. Takes after his mother that way. I was never... Adrian trailed off, focusing intently on mincing garlic. Sarah was the one who was good at this, the whole parenting thing. She made it look effortless, and I just stood there like an idiot, amazed that someone so small could be so important. You're doing better than you think. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, I've spent the last 4 years failing him in every way that matters. Lucas looked up from his dinosaur. You're not failing me, Papa. Adrian froze. You're supposed to be thinking about dinosaurs, not listening to grown-up conversations. I can do both. I have a big brain. Lucas said it with such complete seriousness that Elena had to suppress a smile. And you're not failing me. You're just sad a lot. Because you miss Mama. The knife in Adrian's hand stilled. He stood there for a moment, his back to his son, his shoulders tense.
Yeah, he said finally, his voice rough. I do miss her. Every single day. Me too. But she's not coming back, so we have to be okay without her. That's what my teacher says. Your teacher is very smart. She says when people die, they leave pieces of themselves behind, like memories and things they taught us. And as long as we remember those pieces, they're not really gone.
Adrian turned around and Elena saw tears in his eyes that he was clearly trying to control. What pieces did Mama leave you? Lucas thought about this seriously. She taught me how to be brave, and how to say sorry when I'm wrong, and how to make hot chocolate with the little marshmallows. He paused. What pieces did she leave you? Adrian had to clear his throat twice before he could answer. She taught me that money doesn't matter as much as people do, that kindness is more important than winning, and that love is worth the risk even when you know it might hurt. Those are good pieces. Yeah, they are. Lucas slid off his stool and walked over to hug his father around the waist. Adrian knelt down and pulled him close, and Elena had to look away because the moment felt too private for her to witness. She focused on dicing tomatoes, giving them space. When she glanced back a minute later, Adrian was wiping his eyes with the back of his hand while Lucas showed him how the ankylosaurus's tail could knock over a pepper grinder. They ate dinner at the counter because the formal dining room felt too big and empty. The pasta was simple but good, and Lucas kept up a steady stream of conversation about everything and nothing. Elena found herself laughing at his jokes, answering his rapid-fire questions about New York and dinosaurs and whether she'd ever seen a real stegosaurus. They've been dead for millions of years, she explained gently. I know that. I'm not a baby. But maybe you saw the bones in a museum. I haven't, actually, but I'd like to. Papa can take us. He has lots of money so we can go to any museum we want. Adrian smiled tiredly. Maybe when things calm down a bit, we could do that. You always say that. When things calm down. But things never calm down. The observation was delivered without malice, just simple fact, and it clearly hit Adrian hard. You're right, he said. I do say that a lot, don't I? Lucas nodded seriously. Well, how about this? Next week, you and I are going to the Natural History Museum in Zurich. Just the two of us. No phones, no work emergencies, no excuses. Deal? What if the bad men come back? Then James will handle them. That's his job. My job is to be your dad. Lucas studied his father's face, clearly trying to determine if this was another promise that would be broken. Then he stuck out his hand solemnly. Deal! They shook on it, and Elena felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Maybe Adrian was capable of change. Maybe he could learn to balance his empire with his son. Maybe there was hope here. After dinner, Adrian carried a sleepy Lucas upstairs to bed. Elena started cleaning the kitchen, but Margaret appeared and shooed her away with disapproving efficiency. Mr. Thorne has staff for this, Miss Moretti. You're a guest. I don't mind helping. Nevertheless, Elena retreated to the living room, feeling suddenly out of place. The house was beautiful but cold. Everything perfectly arranged, nothing actually lived in. She wondered if it had felt different when Adrian's wife was alive, or if the sterility came later, after grief made warmth feel impossible. She found herself standing at the windows, looking out over the lake. The city lights reflected on the dark water like fallen stars. Somewhere out there, Sterling Graves was planning his next move, and somewhere in this house, a little boy was asking his father to read him a bedtime story. He wanted 3 stories, Adrian said, appearing behind her. Tried to negotiate for 4, but I held firm at 3. Tough negotiator. Gets it from his mother. Sarah could out-negotiate anyone. He came to stand beside her at the window. Thank you, for earlier, for stopping me from doing something stupid. You mean the hacking plan? Yeah, you were right. If I cross that line, I become what I'm fighting against. And Lucas deserves better than that. So what are you going to do instead? Adrian sighed. I don't know yet. But there has to be a way to beat Sterling without compromising everything I believe in. I just need to find it. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. What is it? Sterling just released another statement. He's calling for a formal investigation into my mental fitness. Says my erratic behavior and paranoid accusations prove I'm a danger to shareholders and employees. Adrian's jaw tightened. He's good. I'll give him that. Every move he makes looks reasonable on the surface. Concerned colleague trying to help a troubled friend. Meanwhile, he's systematically destroying everything I've built. There has to be something we can use against him, something that proves he's behind the attacks. We've been looking for 3 years, Elena. If there was obvious proof, we would have found it by now. Then we look at the non-obvious places. Elena turned away from the window. You said Sterling's been working on that Singapore resort project. What if the weakness isn't in the resort itself? What if it's in how he's financing it? What do you mean? You said he borrowed against his other holdings, which means he had to provide collateral, right? Assets that prove he can cover the loans if the project fails? Yes, standard procedure for that kind of borrowing. So what if those assets are overvalued? What if he's been inflating their worth on paper to secure bigger loans than he could actually cover? Elena started pacing, her mind racing. It's not hacking if we're just looking at publicly available financial records, corporate filings, stock valuations, property assessments, all legal, all accessible. Adrian was staring at her. You think he's committing securities fraud? I think someone who's desperate enough to hire armed attackers is probably desperate enough to lie about his financial position. And if he's over-leveraged, if he's borrowed billions against assets that aren't worth what he claims, then the whole house of cards could collapse. That would take weeks to verify, maybe months, or it would take one phone call to the right person. Elena met his eyes. You said Catherine Walsh controls a pension fund, which means she has forensic accountants on staff whose entire job is spotting fraudulent valuations. What if you asked her to take a look at Sterling's Singapore collateral, purely as a favor, purely because you're concerned about the stability of the market? A slow smile spread across Adrian's face. That's brilliant. It's just pattern recognition. Sterling's been aggressive because he's desperate. People get desperate when they're overextended. It's basic human psychology. Where did you learn to think like this? I told you. My grandfather's puzzles. He taught me to look for what's missing instead of what's there. Sterling's been showing us all his moves, the attacks, the board meetings, the media campaigns. But what hasn't he shown us? His actual financial position. Why? Because it's the one thing he can't fake. Adrian pulled out his phone and dialed. Catherine, it's Adrian. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need your help with something. While he talked, Elena wandered back to the windows. She could see her reflection in the glass, a tired woman in borrowed clothes, standing in a billionaire's mansion in Switzerland. 24 hours ago, this would have been unimaginable. Now it felt almost normal. The human brain was remarkably adaptable. She's going to look into it, Adrian said, ending the call. She agrees that Sterling's been acting erratically, and she has concerns about market stability if his Singapore project is built on shaky ground. Her team will start reviewing publicly available documents first thing tomorrow. And if they find something, then we have him. Securities fraud is a federal crime in multiple jurisdictions. The evidence would be solid enough to hold up in court. Sterling wouldn't be able to lawyer his way out of it. Elena nodded, but something was nagging at her. It feels too easy. Easy? We've been fighting this man for 3 years. Exactly. 3 years and he's stayed ahead of you the whole time. He's smart, careful. What if he's already covered this angle? What if his financials are clean? Then we're back where we started, but at least we tried. Elena wasn't convinced, but she didn't push it. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe Sterling really had been sloppy with his finances. Maybe for once things would actually work in their favor. James appeared in the doorway. Boss, we've got movement. 3 cars just passed through the outer security perimeter. High-end sedans, tinted windows. They're heading toward the house. Adrian's hand went to his phone. Who authorized them through? Nobody. The guards at the gate are claiming they have credentials from your office. I never issued credentials to anyone tonight. Adrian was already moving toward the security center. Lock down the house. Get Lucas to the safe room. Now. But before James could respond, the lights went out. Complete darkness. No emergency backup, no dim safety lights, nothing. Elena felt her heart slam against her ribs. Generator should have kicked in, James said, his voice tense. Someone cut the power at the source. Elena heard movement around her, the sound of guns being drawn. Her eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness. Stay close to me, Adrian said, his hand finding her arm. James, get Lucas. Margaret, Activate the panic protocol. Already on it, sir. Margaret's voice came from somewhere to the left. Then from outside came the sound of breaking glass. Not close, but not far enough away. Someone was coming in through the ground floor windows. They're inside, James said flatly. 6, maybe 8 hostiles. Military formation. How can you tell? Because I trained with men who move like that. These aren't rent-a-cops, boss. These are professionals. Adrian swore viciously. Sterling sent a hit squad to my house while my son is sleeping upstairs. We need to get you and Lucas out. There's an emergency exit through the basement that leads to the I know where it leads, but I'm not running from my own home. Adrian's voice was ice cold. Margaret, you take Lucas and Elena through the basement. Get them to the safe house across the lake. James and I will hold them off. Adrian, no, Elena started. This isn't a discussion. You're a civilian. You shouldn't even be here. And Lucas needs someone with him who isn't armed and planning to shoot people. That's you. I'm not leaving you to... Elena. His hand tightened on her arm. Please. I can't fight them and worry about you at the same time. I need to know you and Lucas are safe. Can you do that for me? She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him this was insane, that they should all run, that fighting a professional hit squad was suicide. But she heard the desperation in his voice and understood that this wasn't about pride or stubbornness. This was about a father protecting his son the only way he knew how. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll get him out. Thank you. Margaret appeared beside them, holding a flashlight. This way, Miss Moretti, quickly. They moved through the darkened house, Margaret leading them with the kind of calm efficiency that suggested she'd planned for exactly this scenario. Behind them, Elena heard voices. Sterling's men spreading through the house, checking rooms. They weren't even trying to be quiet. They knew the power was out. They knew Adrian was trapped. They reached Lucas's bedroom to find the boy sitting up in bed, his eyes wide with fear. Papa! Your father sent me to keep you safe, Margit said gently. We're going on an adventure. Can you be very brave and very quiet? Lucas nodded, clutching his ankylosaurus. Elena scooped him up, and he wrapped his arms and legs around her like a monkey. Where's Papa? He whispered into her ear. He's making sure the bad men don't follow us. He'll come find us soon. I promise. It was a promise she had no authority to make, but Lucas needed to hear it. They made their way to the basement through a series of hallways that Margit navigated without hesitation. Behind them, Elena heard a gunshot, then another, then a whole volley of them, the sound echoing through the house like thunder. Lucas flinched against her shoulder. Papa, he whimpered. He's okay. He has James with him. James is very good at protecting people. She had no idea if that was true. For all she knew, Adrian was already dead. Sterling's men were professionals. Adrian and James were just 2 people against 6 or 8 armed attackers. They reached a hidden door in the basement that Margit opened with a keycard. Behind it was a tunnel, concrete walls, LED strips providing dim lighting from some kind of battery backup system. The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness. This leads to a boathouse on the other side of the lake, Margit explained. There's a boat waiting, 20 minutes to the safe house. They started walking, moving as quickly as they could while Elena carried Lucas. Behind them, the sounds of gunfire continued. Elena tried not to think about what was happening back there. Tried not to imagine Adrian bleeding out on the floor of his own home. Halfway through the tunnel, Lucas spoke quietly against her shoulder. Is Papa going to die like Mama did? The question hit Elena like a physical blow. No, sweetheart. Your Papa is very smart and very strong. He's going to be fine. Mama was smart and strong too, but she died anyway. Elena didn't have an answer for that. Because he was right. Sometimes being smart and strong wasn't enough. Sometimes bad things happened to good people, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Your Papa loves you very much, she said instead, and love makes people fight harder than anything else. So I think he's going to be okay, because he has something worth fighting for. Lucas seemed to accept this. He rested his head on her shoulder and held his dinosaur close. They emerged from the tunnel into a boathouse that smelled like lake water and gasoline. A sleek speedboat was moored inside, and Margit immediately began prepping it for departure. Elena set Lucas down and pulled out her phone. No signal this deep in the tunnel structure. But as soon as they got on the lake, the explosion happened without warning. One second, Elena was standing in the boathouse, and the next she was on the ground with her ears ringing and Lucas screaming beside her. She looked up to see flames pouring from the tunnel entrance behind them. "They bombed the house," Margit said, her voice shaking. "They actually bombed it." Elena's hands were trembling as she helped Lucas to his feet. He was crying now, full sobs, calling for his father. "Get them in the boat," Margit ordered. "Now, before they realize we're not inside." But Elena was frozen, staring at the flames. Adrian was in that house. James was in that house. And Sterling's men had just... Her phone buzzed. With shaking hands, she pulled it out. One text message from an unknown number. "I'm okay. Get Lucas somewhere safe. I'll find you." Adrian, he'd gotten out somehow. "Miss Moretti," Margit's voice was sharp. "The boat! Now!" Elena climbed into the boat with Lucas still sobbing in her arms. Margit started the engine and they pulled out of the boathouse onto the dark lake. Behind them, flames lit up the hillside where Adrian's house had been. Lucas had finally stopped crying. He just stared at the fire with empty eyes, holding his ankylosaurus. "I want my papa," he whispered. "I know, baby. I know." Elena held him close and tried to stop her own hands from shaking. "He's coming. He promised he'd find us, and your papa keeps his promises." She just hoped that was true, because if Sterling had killed Adrian, then none of this mattered. The evidence, the investigations, the careful plans. It all meant nothing if Adrian was dead. The boat cut through dark water toward an uncertain destination, carrying a traumatized child, a frightened woman, and the last fragile hope that maybe, somehow, this nightmare would end without destroying everything and everyone they cared about. Behind them, Adrian Thorne's house burned like a funeral pyre, and Sterling Graves was probably already preparing his next statement about the tragic accident that had befallen his troubled competitor. But somewhere in the darkness, if Elena let herself believe, Adrian was still alive, still fighting, still refusing to give up. And that had to be enough to keep going. The safe house turned out to be a modest apartment above a bakery on the opposite side of the lake, the kind of place you'd walk past without a second glance. Margit had keys and security codes, and within minutes they were inside with the doors locked and curtains drawn. Lucas hadn't spoken since they'd left the burning house behind. He just sat on the couch, clutching his ankylosaurus, staring at nothing. Elena's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "Alive, James 2. Heading to you now. ETA 30 minutes. She nearly collapsed with relief. Lucas looked up at her, his eyes red from crying. "Is that Papa?" "Yes. He's okay. He's coming here." The boy's lower lip trembled. "You're not lying?" "I'm not lying. I promise." Lucas nodded slowly, then returned to staring at the wall. Elena sat beside him and put her arm around his shoulders. He leaned into her without saying anything, and they sat like that in silence while Margit made phone calls in rapid German that Elena couldn't follow. 28 minutes later, there was a coded knock at the door. Margit checked the security camera, then opened it to reveal Adrian and James. They looked like they'd been through a war. Adrian's shirt was torn and streaked with soot. James had a cut above his eyebrow that was still bleeding, and both of them moved like every muscle hurt. Lucas launched himself off the couch and crashed into his father hard enough to nearly knock him over. "Papa! Papa! I thought you were dead!" Adrian dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around his son, his face crumpling in a way Elena had never seen before. "I'm here, buddy. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Lucas was crying again, but this time from relief instead of fear. Adrian just held him, rocking slightly, whispering things Elena couldn't hear. James moved past them to talk quietly with Margit, and Elena found herself standing awkwardly in the middle of the small apartment, unsure where she fit in this moment. After a few minutes, Lucas pulled back enough to look at his father's face. "Our house exploded." "I know. All my dinosaurs were in there. We'll get you new ones, better ones." "I don't want new ones. I want the ones Mama gave me." His voice broke on the last word. Adrian's eyes closed briefly. "I know, Lucas, I know. And I'm sorry. This is my fault. All of it. It's the bad man's fault, Mr. Sterling." "Yes. Him too." Adrian wiped his son's face with his thumb. "But I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming. You saved me, though. You and Elena and Margit. You got me out. Barely. Adrian looked up at Elena, and the gratitude in his eyes was almost painful to see. If Elena hadn't been there, but I was there, Elena said quietly, and we're all okay. That's what matters. James cleared his throat. Boss, we need to talk about next steps. Sterling's people are probably monitoring police channels. They'll know we got out, which means they'll be looking for us. Let them look. Adrian stood up, keeping one hand on Lucas's shoulder. I'm done running. I'm done playing defense. Sterling just tried to murder my son. That's not a line you cross and walk away from. What are you going to do? Elena asked. Adrian's expression was cold and hard. I'm going to destroy him, completely. No mercy, no second chances. I'm going to take everything he has and burn it to the ground. Adrian, don't. His voice was sharp. Don't tell me to be the bigger person. Don't tell me to follow the rules. Sterling just bombed my house with my child inside. The time for playing fair ended about 30 minutes ago. Elena understood the rage. She felt it herself. But she also saw Lucas watching his father with wide, frightened eyes, and she knew this moment mattered more than Adrian realized. You're right, she said carefully. Sterling crossed a line, and he needs to pay for it. But there's a difference between justice and revenge. One of them makes you stronger, the other one just makes you angrier. Maybe I want to be angry. Maybe you do. But is that what you want Lucas to see? His father becoming the kind of man who fights brutality with brutality? Adrian looked down at his son. Lucas was still holding onto his hand, still watching him with those two serious eyes that had already seen too much. What do you want me to do, Elena? Just let him get away with this? No. I want you to beat him the right way, with evidence and law and the truth. I want you to prove that being better than him actually means something. She paused. You told me once that your wife taught you kindness was more important than winning. Was that true, or just something nice to say? The silence that followed was broken by James. Catherine Walsh called while we were en route. Her forensic team found something in Sterling's Singapore filings. Major discrepancies between what he told investors and what he filed with regulatory agencies. The properties he used as collateral are overvalued by at least 40%, maybe more. Adrian's head snapped toward him. You're sure? Catherine's sure. She's already contacted the SEC and Swiss financial regulators. They're opening a formal investigation first thing tomorrow morning. That's not enough. Investigation take months. Sterling could disappear by then, move his assets offshore. Not if we leak the information to the press tonight, Elena said. If the story breaks before Sterling has time to prepare, his investors will panic. Stock prices will drop. Banks will call in loans. His whole empire collapses before he can protect it. Adrian stared at her. You want to ruin him financially. I want to use the truth to hold him accountable. That's not revenge. That's consequences. It's also the same thing you stopped me from doing earlier, when I wanted to hack his files. No. Earlier you wanted to find dirt illegally. This is different. Catherine found the evidence through legitimate channels. Now we just make sure everyone knows about it. Elena met his eyes. There's a difference between exposing the truth and fabricating it. One is journalism, the other is slander. James was already pulling out his phone. I know a reporter at the Financial Times. She's been asking questions about Sterling for months, but couldn't get enough evidence to publish. If I give her Catherine's findings, do it, Adrian said, but I want my name kept out of it. This needs to look like independent journalism, not a hit piece from a competitor. Already planned on it, boss. While James made the call, Adrian sat down on the couch with Lucas still attached to his side. The boy had finally stopped crying, but looked exhausted. Margaret appeared from the kitchen with hot chocolate and cookies, and Lucas accepted both without enthusiasm. Elena watched Adrian with his son and felt something shift in her chest. This man had been a stranger 36 hours ago. Now she'd helped him fight a war, escaped gunfire and explosions with his child, and was actively participating in the destruction of another man's empire. Her life had become completely unrecognizable. And the strange thing was, she didn't want to go back. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate asking where the hell she'd been for 2 days. Elena stared at the message, trying to remember what her old life had even looked like. The restaurant, the exhaustion, the feeling of being invisible. It felt like it had happened to someone else. You should call your mother, Adrian said quietly. Let her know you're safe. It's 3 in the morning in New York. She's probably awake anyway. Mothers don't sleep when their children are in danger. Trust me on this. Elena stepped into the small bedroom and dialed. Her mother answered on the first ring. Elena Maria Moretti, where the hell have you been? I'm sorry, Mom. Things got complicated. Complicated? Your hospital security told me armed men were asking about me. Then you disappear for 2 days. That's not complicated. That's terrifying.
I know. I'm sorry. But I'm okay. And the men are gone. You're safe now.
What about you? Are you safe? Elena looked through the doorway at Adrian and Lucas on the couch, at Margaret checking security cameras, at James still on the phone coordinating with reporters. I think so. Maybe. It's hard to explain. Try. So Elena did. She explained about the restaurant, about Adrian, about Sterling and the attacks and the explosion. Her mother listened in silence until she finished. Let me see if I understand this correctly, Sophia said finally. You're in Switzerland with a billionaire and his child, hiding from assassins, while trying to destroy another billionaire using financial fraud evidence. When you say it like that, it sounds insane. It is insane, Tesoro. It's also the most alive you've sounded in years. Elena blinked. What? You've been sleepwalking since your father died, going through motions, surviving instead of living. Even when you talk about that horrible restaurant, you sound defeated. But right now? Right now, you sound like you actually care about something again. Mom, I care about you, Set. I know you do, but caring about me isn't the same as caring about your own life. And for the first time in a long time, I think you're actually invested in what happens next. Her mother coughed, the wet rattle that meant she'd forgotten to take her medication. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to see this through. Whatever this is with this Adrian person and his son, see it through to the end. But what about you? The hospital bills are being handled. Your billionaire friend already took care of that, remember? I've got better doctors now than I've had in months, so stop using me as an excuse to avoid living your own life. I'm not. You are. You've been doing it for over a year, and I love you for it, but I also need you to stop. I'm dying, Elena. We both know it. And when I'm gone, I need to know you're going to be okay, that you're going to have something in your life besides grief and guilt. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. You're already doing it. You're fighting for something that matters. You're protecting a child. You're standing up to powerful people who think they can do whatever they want. That's not nothing, Tesoro. That's everything. They talked for a few more minutes before Sophia's exhaustion became too obvious to ignore. Elena hung up feeling hollowed out and strangely lighter at the same time. When she returned to the living room, James had finished his calls and was briefing Adrian. Story goes live in 3 hours. Financial Times is running it as their lead piece. They've got independent verification of Catherine's findings, plus some additional dirt their investigative team dug up. Apparently, Sterling's been cooking books on at least 4 major projects, not just Singapore. How bad is it for him? Career-ending bad. Maybe prison bad, if prosecutors can make the charges stick. James allowed himself a small smile. By sunrise, Sterling Graves is going to be the most toxic name in international finance. Adrian nodded slowly. Good. That's good. But he didn't sound satisfied. He sounded tired. Lucas had fallen asleep against his shoulder, the hot chocolate forgotten on the table. You should rest too, Elena said. You look like you're about to collapse. I'm fine. You're not fine. None of us are fine. We just survived an explosion and a hit squad. She sat down on the other side of him. It's okay to admit you're exhausted. Adrian looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression took her breath away. If I stop moving, I'm going to have to think about what almost happened, how close I came to losing him. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I can't think about that yet. I'll fall apart. Then fall apart. You're allowed to. I'm his father. I need to be strong. You are strong. You got him out of a burning building. You kept him safe. That's strength. Elena reached over and took his free hand. But strength doesn't mean never breaking. It means breaking and still finding a way to keep going. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. They sat like that for a while. 2 exhausted people holding on to each other while a child slept between them and dawn crept closer. The Financial Times story broke at 6 a.m. Zurich time. By 7, every major financial news outlet in the world was running with it. By 8, Sterling's stock portfolio had dropped 30%. By 9, 3 of his major investors had publicly called for his resignation from their boards. They watched it unfold on Margit's laptop, the news spreading like wildfire through financial markets. Sterling's face appeared on screen after screen, looking increasingly desperate as reporters shouted questions at him outside his office. "This is a coordinated attack," he was saying, his usual polish completely gone. "Adrian Thorne has been orchestrating a campaign of lies and manipulation to destroy me because he can't accept that his time has passed. Mr. Graves, how do you respond to evidence that you inflated asset values by more than $800 million? Those allegations are completely unfounded. The SEC has confirmed they're opening a formal investigation. Do you plan to cooperate? I have nothing to hide. This is all a misunderstanding that will be cleared up once." The footage cut to a reporter in London. Sterling Graves' legal team has just released a statement claiming the discrepancies in his Singapore filings were the result of accounting errors, not fraud. However, sources within the SEC tell us that the pattern of inflation appears deliberate and systematic, spanning multiple projects over several years. Lucas was awake now, eating cereal and watching cartoons on Margit's tablet, blessedly unaware of the financial apocalypse happening on the laptop beside him. Adrian sat with his arm around his son, his expression unreadable. "You did it," Elena said quietly. "Sterling's finished." Maybe. Or maybe his lawyers find a way to spin this. Maybe his connections protect him. Maybe... "Adrian?" She cut him off. "You won. The evidence is solid. The investigation is real. Sterling's career is over, and he did it to himself by being greedy and reckless. This is justice, not revenge. Can you accept that?" Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I can." His phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his eyebrows rose. "It's Klaus Hoffman, from the board." He answered on speaker. "Klaus, Adrian, I owe you an apology." The old banker's voice was heavy with regret. "I should have listened to you about Sterling, should have taken your concerns seriously instead of dismissing them as paranoia." "You weren't alone in that." "No, but I was chairman of the board. I had a responsibility to investigate your claims properly. Instead, I let Sterling manipulate me, let him convince me you were unstable." Klaus paused. "For what it's worth, the board voted this morning. Unanimous support for your continued leadership, and we formally severed all ties with Sterling and his affiliated companies." "What about the charity foundation? The money Meridian was funneling through it?" "I've already contacted authorities. Full disclosure, full cooperation. If I committed fraud, even unknowingly, I deserve to face consequences." The old man sighed. "I'm also resigning from the board, effective immediately. What Sterling did happened on my watch. That makes it partially my responsibility." "Klaus, you don't need to..." "Well, yes, Adrian, I do. Some mistakes require accountability, not excuses." A pause. "Take care of yourself. And that son of yours. Don't make the same mistake I did, putting business before family." The call ended. Adrian set down the phone and stared at it for a moment. "He's right," he said finally. "I've been putting business before Lucas for 4 years, using work as an excuse to avoid actually being his father. That ends now." "What are you going to do?" Adrian looked at his son, who was absorbed in a cartoon about talking trains. "I'm going to step back. Not resign, but delegate more. Hire people I trust to run things while I focus on what actually matters. Lucas needs his father more than the company needs my constant micromanagement." "That's a big change." "Yeah, it is. But watching our house explode while my son was inside kind of puts things in perspective." He turned to Elena. "What about you? What's next for the waitress who helped destroy a billionaire?" Elena had been avoiding thinking about that question. "I don't know. I guess I go back to New York. Back to my life. Back to that restaurant." "No, definitely not that restaurant, but I need to find work. I have bills, responsibilities." "What if you didn't?" She looked at him. "What? What if you stayed? Here in Zurich? Not as a waitress or an assistant or anything you don't want to be. Just as someone who helps me see patterns I miss. Someone who tells me when I'm being an idiot. Someone Lucas actually likes, which is rarer than you'd think." Elena's heart was beating too fast.
Adrian, you can't just offer me a job because I helped you for a few days.
I'm not offering you a job. I'm offering you a chance to figure out what you actually want to do with your life without worrying about medical bills or rent or surviving. He leaned forward. You told me you were supposed to be in graduate school, studying Renaissance literature. What if you could go back to that? The university here in Zurich has an excellent humanities program. I could make some calls. I can't let you pay for my education. Why not? Because that's not how the world works. People don't just give other people opportunities for free. They do if they want to, and I want to. Adrian's expression was serious. You saved my son's life, Elena. You helped me see clearly when I was too angry to think straight. You found connections my investigators missed. That's worth something. That's worth a lot. I didn't do any of that expecting payment. I know. That's exactly why I want to help you. He paused. Look, I'm not good at this, the whole emotional vulnerability thing. But the truth is, having you around these past 2 days has reminded me that there are still good people in the world. People who do the right thing even when it costs them. And I don't want to lose that reminder. So yes, this is partially selfish, but it's also genuine. Stay. Figure out what makes you happy. Let me help make that possible. Elena didn't know what to say. A week ago, this would have sounded like a fantasy. Now it just sounded terrifying, because accepting meant admitting her old life was over, meant choosing to move forward instead of just surviving. I need to think about it, she said finally. Fair enough. Take all the time you need. Over the next week, Sterling's empire continued to collapse in spectacular fashion. The SEC investigation expanded to include multiple projects. 3 banks called in loans he couldn't cover. His investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. By day 5, Sterling Graves had filed for bankruptcy protection and was facing criminal charges in 2 countries. Adrian watched it all from the safe house, then from a hotel suite, then finally from a new house he'd purchased in the suburbs of Zurich, something smaller than the destroyed estate, something that felt more like a home than a fortress. Lucas adjusted with the resilience of children. He mourned his lost dinosaurs for exactly 1 day, then got excited about picking out new ones with Margit. He started sleeping through the night again, started smiling more, started actually talking to his father instead of just answering questions. And Elena watched all of it while trying to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do with her life. Her mother called every day. The new treatments were working better than the old ones. She had more energy, less pain. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, which in cancer terms meant maybe she had months instead of weeks. Have you decided yet? Sophia asked during one of their calls. Decided what? Whether you're going to accept Adrian's offer. Don't pretend you haven't been agonizing over it. It feels too much like charity. It feels like someone seeing your worth and wanting to invest in it. That's not charity, Tesoro. That's opportunity. Her mother coughed. Do you like him, Adrian? Elena had been avoiding that question too. I respect him. I think he's trying to be a better person, trying to be a better father. That's not what I asked. Mom, I'm dying. I get to ask invasive questions. Do you like him? Elena thought about Adrian at the restaurant, soaked and exhausted. Adrian destroying Ryan Keller's company in 60 seconds. Adrian holding his son after the explosion, his face crumpling with relief. Adrian asking her to stay. I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe. But that's not why I'd stay. I'd stay because I like Lucas. Because I like feeling useful. Because going back to New York feels like giving up. Then don't go back. Simple as that. But nothing was simple. Elena had spent her entire adult life playing it safe, making careful choices, avoiding risks. And look where that had gotten her. Exhausted, broke, and invisible. 2 weeks after the explosion, Adrian asked Elena to come with him to visit his wife's grave. It was in a small cemetery outside the city, overlooking the mountains. Sarah's headstone was simple granite with her name and dates and the words, beloved wife and mother. Adrian stood there for a long time without speaking. Elena stayed back, giving him space. I haven't been here in 6 months, he said finally. Couldn't face it. Couldn't face her. Felt like I'd failed everything she'd asked me to protect. You haven't failed. Haven't I? I almost got our son killed. Almost let anger turn me into someone she wouldn't recognize. But you didn't. You chose differently. That counts for something. Adrian knelt down and brushed some leaves off the headstone. I used to come here and talk to her, tell her about Lucas, about work, about everything. Then one day I just stopped, because talking to her meant admitting she was really gone, and I wasn't ready for that. Are you ready now? I don't know. Maybe. He touched the stone gently. Sarah, this is Elena. She saved our son. Saved me too, in a different way. I think you would have liked her. She's stubborn and smart, and she doesn't let me get away with anything. Elena felt her throat tighten. I'm trying to do better, Adrian continued, his voice rough. Trying to be the father Lucas needs, the man you believed I could be. I don't know if I'm succeeding, but I'm trying. That has to count for something, right? He stayed kneeling there for a few more minutes, then stood up and turned to Elena. Thank you for coming with me. Of course. They walked back to the car in silence. Halfway there, Adrian spoke again. I meant what I said about wanting you to stay, but I need you to know it's not because I'm trying to replace Sarah. Nobody could replace her. This is about moving forward, about building something new instead of just protecting what's left of the past. I know. And I need you to know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it. If you want to go back to New York, I'll help you get settled. If you want to stay, but just as friends, that works too. There's no pressure here, just possibility. Elena looked at him, this complicated, damaged man who spoke her grandfather's language and who'd given her mother the medical care that might buy her a few more months, who'd trusted her when he trusted almost nobody, who'd let her see him fall apart and put himself back together. I want to stay, she said. Not because of you, not because of Lucas, but because I'm tired of playing it safe, tired of being invisible, tired of letting fear make all my decisions. Adrian smiled. Those are good reasons. They're selfish reasons. The best reasons usually are. 3 months later, Elena enrolled in the graduate program at the University of Zurich. She moved into a small apartment near campus that Adrian helped her find, but that she paid for herself with money from a consulting position with his company. Real work, real pay, reviewing contracts for linguistic precision, and spotting the kind of patterns that most people missed. Lucas started calling her Aunt Elena. Adrian took him to the Natural History Museum like he'd promised, then kept taking him every Sunday. They developed routines, movie nights on Fridays, hiking in the mountains on weekends when the weather was good, dinners where everyone actually sat together and talked instead of staring at screens. Sterling Graves was convicted on 14 counts of securities fraud. He got 12 years in a federal prison and was ordered to pay restitution that would bankrupt him even after he served his sentence. The man who'd tried to kill Adrian, who'd bombed his house, who'd terrorized a 7-year-old child, was finally held accountable. And Elena watched it all happen while building a new life that looked nothing like what she'd planned, but felt more right than anything she'd done before. Her mother died 4 months after Elena moved to Zurich, peacefully, in her sleep, with Elena holding her hand. The cancer had finally won, but the experimental treatments had bought her time. Time to see her daughter happy. Time to stop worrying. You did good, Tesoro, she'd whispered during one of their last conversations. You chose to live instead of just surviving. I'm proud of you. Elena mourned her mother the way you mourned someone you knew was leaving. With sadness, yes, but also with gratitude for the time they'd had. And when the grief threatened to swallow her whole, she had Adrian and Lucas there to remind her she wasn't alone. 6 months after the explosion, Adrian and Elena took Lucas back to New York. Not to the restaurant that had closed down after Roberta was fired for embezzlement, but to Central Park, to the spot near Bethesda Fountain where Adrian had danced with his wife years before. This is where your mother taught me that joy was worth the risk, Adrian told Lucas, even when you know it might hurt someday, even when you know nothing lasts forever. Lucas studied the fountain seriously. Was she a good dancer? Terrible, absolutely awful, but she didn't care. She just wanted to be happy. Adrian looked at Elena. That's a lesson I'm still learning. Me too, Elena said. They stood there together, watching street musicians play jazz and tourists take photos, and the world spin on like it always did. And Elena thought about the night she'd served soup to a stranger in a rainstorm, how she'd had no idea that one moment of kindness would lead her here, how you could never predict which choices would matter and which ones wouldn't. That night they had dinner at a different restaurant, a small Italian place in Brooklyn that Lucas had found on a food blog. The waitress who served them was young, maybe 22, with circles under her eyes that suggested she was working 2 jobs or putting herself through school, or both. When she brought the check, Adrian left a tip that was 5 times the bill. The waitress stared at the receipt. "Sir, I think you made a mistake." "No mistake. You were kind to my son. You made recommendations that actually suited his taste instead of just pushing expensive items. That matters." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You have no idea. This is going to help so much." "I think I have some idea," Adrian said gently. "Pay it forward when you can." As they left the restaurant, Lucas took both their hands, swinging between them like kids do. "Papa, was that like what Elena did for you at the other restaurant?" Adrian looked at Elena over his son's head. "Yeah, buddy, just like that." "Are you going to bring her to Switzerland too?" "I don't think she needs to come to Switzerland, but maybe we helped her night get a little easier. Sometimes that's enough." They walked through Brooklyn streets that were bright with life, and Elena thought about waitresses and billionaires and the strange paths that brought people together. She thought about her mother's words about choosing to live instead of just surviving. She thought about Adrian learning to be a father again, about Lucas learning to trust again, about herself learning that taking risks didn't always end in disaster. Sometimes you served soup to a stranger and it changed absolutely nothing. Sometimes you were kind and nobody noticed. Sometimes you did everything right and still lost. But sometimes, rarely, unexpectedly, impossibly, one moment of choosing kindness over cruelty opened doors you didn't even know existed, led you to places you couldn't have imagined, gave you a chance to become someone you'd never thought you could be. Elena Moretti had been a waitress who felt invisible. Now she was a graduate student, a consultant, a person who mattered to people who mattered to her. And the strange thing was, none of it had required her to become someone different. She just needed to stay true to who she'd always been, even when the world tried to convince her that kindness was weakness and compassion was foolish. 2 years later, Adrian proposed. Not with a grand gesture or a public display, but quietly, in his kitchen while they made dinner and Lucas set the table. Just a simple question about whether Elena wanted to make their accidental family official. She said yes. Not because he was rich or powerful or could give her opportunities, but because somewhere between a rainstorm in Manhattan and a new house in Zurich, they'd built something real, something worth protecting. They got married in a small ceremony with just a handful of people. James was there, of course. Margaret. A few of Adrian's actual friends, the ones who'd stuck by him during the Sterling crisis. And Lucas, who took his job as ring bearer with the same seriousness he brought to everything. "Do you take this woman to be your wife?" the officiant asked. Adrian looked at Elena, really looked at her, the way he'd looked at her in that corner booth when he'd spoken her grandfather's language, like she was a person worth seeing. "I do," he said. And Elena, who'd once been invisible, who'd once measured her worth in tips and medical bills, who'd once thought kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford, looked back at the man who'd been a stranger in a rainstorm and said the same thing. Because sometimes the best things in life weren't the ones you planned for, or worked toward, or even deserved. Sometimes they were just moments when you chose to be kind and the universe surprised you by being kind back. Sometimes you served soup to a stranger, and the stranger turned out to be the beginning of everything that came after. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the scared little boy eating pasta at your counter grew up and gave a toast at your wedding, talking about how his Aunt Elena became his stepmom, and how that made him the luckiest kid in the world because now he had 2 people who loved him instead of just one. Life didn't come with guarantees. Bad things still happened to good people. Cancer still killed mothers. Powerful men still got away with terrible things sometimes. The world was still hard and unfair and cruel in 1,000 different ways. But it was also full of moments like this, small acts of kindness that rippled outward, strangers who became family, choices that mattered even when you couldn't see how. And that, Elena thought, as she danced with her new husband while Lucas tried to teach Margaret the floss, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.